Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had the Moon God's Blade? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The teacher clapped his hands together, calling for the attention of the class. Well, he began, waving a stack of papers in front of him as his students quieted down. Since all of you are third years as of now, I say it's about time that all of you put some thought into what kind of future you'll want to pursue. That said, he smirked, throwing his papers in the air. You all want to be heroes, don't you? The students laughed in agreement, displaying the power of their quirks to show their enthusiasm. The teacher chuckled, shaking his head in mirth. All right, settle down. You all have incredible quirks, but the laws against public quirk use still exist, and they apply to the school as well, unfortunately. On the frontmost seat, Katsuki scoffed. Please, as if any of these extras has even a remote chance of going far in the hero course. His lips curled into a nasty smirk when his classmates started shouting indignantly. Shut up, if I'm so wrong then why don't any of you come here and prove it? He grinned, creating small explosions in his palms. Oh, Bakugo, if I remember correctly you are aiming for UA's hero course, correct? The teacher hummed. The others' cries almost immediately went from indignancy to disbelief. Wait, really? Isn't UA impossible to get into, though? The school has a 0.2% acceptance rate. See, this is why I call all of you extras. He roared, jumping from his seat to stand on top of his table. Unlike you fuckwits, low numbers don't scare me. I aced the mock test, I'm strong, and I have confidence. That's why I'll be able to join UA and surpass All Might. I'll be known as the strongest hero in all of Japan, if not the entire world. Oh, and you are aiming for UA as well, am I right, Midoriya? Bakugo froze in place and the rest of the class turned to the aforementioned boy, who was occupied jotting down notes on his notebook about the fight he had seen earlier on the way towards school. His eyes flickered upwards for a moment before focusing back on his notes. Yes, he said quietly. Bakugo finally shook himself out of his shock, turning an irate glare towards the other boy. Deku! He growled, thundering in his direction. You think you are a hotshot, huh? Think you can stand on the same ground as me with that butter knife and that mud of yours? Izuku closed his notebook and gave the blonde a dismissive glance, which only served to infuriate him further. Answer me. Bakugo, that's enough. The teacher called. Go back to your seat or I'll be forced to give your detention after school. The blonde growled again but ultimately complied, turning on his heel and stomping back to his chair. Izuku sighed, giving his former friend a disappointed glance. He shook his head and accepted the paper that was offered to him, jotting down the school he was planning to go to. Izuku calmly put his materials back inside of his backpack, going over his plans for the day in his head. His mother had sent him a message earlier asking him to buy groceries on his way home, which meant he'd need to make a small detour through the park. Maybe he should probably check what were the park's rules on quirk usage. Luna might not be fully sentient but she could still play with him like a normal dog would. Speaking of dogs, here comes the human chihuahua. Izuku rolled his eyes, noticing Bakugo and his cronies approaching. We aren't done yet, Deku. He snarled, slamming his hand on the boy's table. What the hell do you think you are doing by applying to UA, huh? You want to ruin my dreams, you fucker. No one said there should only be one candidate per school, Bakugo. Me applying to the same school as you won't do anything to your dream. Izuku spoke calmly, zipping his backpack closed and putting it on his back. It won't. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. I'm the only one here who has a change on that school, and I'll be the only one who will pass. It's my origin story, and I won't let a useless F like you ruin it. Izuku leveled him with an unimpressed stare. If I'm as weak as you are implying I am, then I'll just fail the entrance exam and there's that, you get in and I don't, and your dream comes through. Unless of course, Izuku smirked slightly. I am strong enough for it and you're just scared. He chuckled, walking past the shocked boy, whose expression was slowly turning from angry to apoplectic. Bakugo turned with his hand glowing, ready to explode the green to Kingdom Come, but a series of sharp fangs clamped around his wrist and a warning growl stopped him. He turned to the offender, a large ethereal wolf that seemed to be made of blue energy and stars, glaring at him in warning. "Down, girl, he's not worth it. Or even a threat, really," Izuku called without turning back, stepping out of the classroom. Luna released the blonde's wrist, and with another growl she dissolved into moondust particles, disappearing into the ether. "Come back here, Deku." Bakugo didn't waste a moment and ran after his target, but as soon as he stepped out of the classroom, he noticed that the other boy was nowhere to be seen. "Damn it. You should really stop appearing like that, Luna. You know I'm more than strong enough to take care of myself," Izuku admonished the wolf, knowing she was able to hear him even when she wasn't summoned. "I know Lupus appointed you to act as my familiar, but still." Shining dust particles swirled in front of his face for a moment, making him snort. Overprotective mutt. He refocused on the path ahead and saw the tunnel that led to the park. "Better run and get the groceries Mom asked for," he commented, entering the tunnel. He managed to walk through half of the tunnel unbothered before he heard a strange noise from behind him. Turning around, he raised an eyebrow upon seeing a giant mass of sludge pass through the holes of the manhole in the middle of the tunnel, and the other joined the first when he saw two eyes and a mouth pop out of it. It looked around wildly before zeroing on the boy, its lip curling into a nasty smile. "Ah, a medium-sized invisibility cloak." "Yeah, no," Izuku muttered, calling upon his quirk and creating a sword similar to a katana, which seemed to be forged out of the same energy as Luna was, but it seemed much more tangible compared to the Star Wolf's slightly see-through ethereal body, if the solid azure color of the blade was anything to go by. The sludge mass moved forward quickly, and Izuku moved backwards just as quickly, slashing off all three tentacles that had approached. Faster in order to capture him. Curiously, when the blade made contact with the tentacles it spread blue dust in the same direction of the attack, which soon converged together and formed another blade each, though those were more ethereal than the blade he was holding, just like his wolf. The villain laughed. "Cutting my tentacles off won't do anything, boy. You're just delaying the inevitable," he demonstrated by pulling back the sludge that was cut off and regrowing the tentacles. The teen narrowed his eyes. "Well, I'll just have to step up my game then." He threw his blade from his right hand to the left and started to spin it like a saw, using his connection to the blade to keep it from flying off as the movement started to create moondust for him to use later. With his now free right hand, he pointed his open palm to one of his ethereal blades, and it immediately snapped from the ground to his grasp. As soon as he did that, he had to jump to the side and slash off another tentacle, maintaining his original blade all the while. Unlike the spinning blade, however, the slash didn't create another blade, instead making it glow in power after the first slash, and then creating the blade with the second slash, making the glow go away in the process. For a few seconds the fight went as that, the boy dodging the main mass of sludge almost effortlessly and slashing off any stray tentacle that got too close for comfort, creating an extra blade every 2 slashes. The moment he had created his 10th blade, the boy jumped toward a wall and kicked off of it, flying over the villain who had tried to crash down like a wave over him. "Stay still," he roared in frustration. "Sure, I'm done anyways," Izuku huffed, locking eyes with the villain. "Lunar Spellblade," he intoned, and all 10 scattered blades dissolved into moondust, flying in streams to join the ring of moondust spinning alongside his main blade. Straightening himself up, he stopped the movement with his blade and put it pommel to pommel with his ethereal blade, as if holding 2-bladed Naginata. In that position, he started to spin both of the blades together in front of him, creating more moondust and focusing the amount he had already created. The sludge villain saw the preparation for the attack and decided to end the boy before he could do whatever he was about to do. Puffing up as much as he could, the mass of sludge covered the entirety of his side of the passage, not even letting the light of the other side of the tunnel pass through. "Now you're mine," he roared, advancing on the boy. Izuku didn't falter, just moving his eye to meet the monsters, and just as he was about to be consumed, he struck, pulling the blades parallel to his shoulders with crossed arms before unleashing 2 simultaneous slashes in front of him. Midnight Howl. The Sludge villain could barely widen his eyes before a vortex of moondust tore into and through him, dispersing him into multiple chunks and sending most of his mass flying away. Demon you, he thought desperately before he was knocked out. Izuku panted slightly, dispersing his ethereal blade and maintaining only his original. That was about 27 blades worth of moondust if I count both the loose dust I was generating and the fakes, he mused. Not bad, huh? Luna briefly summoned herself and stood on her hind legs in order to lick his cheek, making him laugh. Then she fell back on all fours and let out a very deep growl, to which Izuku nodded. Yeah, the old mutt could probably make an even bigger blast with much less fuel, couldn't he? But this place is a bit too small to properly call him, with how destructive his main attack is. The two of them shuddered. The blast was big. Hey girl, could you go call a hero while I keep an eye on this guy right here? He hummed, observing the unmoving Sludge. We don't want him to regain consciousness and escape, now do we? Luna nodded in agreement and turned towards the opening towards the main street, but before she could start running, the manhole from which the villain had come from was punched open from inside, and a massive figure climbed out of it. It's all right now, young man. I am here. Izuku's mouth dropped open, his calm demeanor shattering when faced with his favorite hero. All Might? He all but shouted in surprise and awe. His favorite hero of all time was right in front of him. Oh Starshikudi happy now. A bark snapped him out of his awe-induced stupor and he turned to face his familiar, who was sitting beside the hero, tilting her head slightly towards him. Izuku blinked and then chuckled. Good work, girl. Luna barked again and dispersed in moondust. Well then, it seems I wasn't as needed as I expected to be. You did this, young man? He asked, inspecting the boy's handwork. Izuku nodded, not trusting his voice. Very well done. This villain was pretty fast. He couldn't have been easy to deal with. Izuku finally recomposed himself enough to talk. Well, he wasn't that difficult. I just needed time to prepare an attack that would stick since any damage my sword dealt was negated by his quirk. He shrugged, lifting his sword for the hero to see. All Might nodded. In any rate, I'd like to apologize for getting you involved in the first place. He managed to give me the slip in this confusing sewer system. I barely know the city's layout, but now I'll have to learn what's under it as well, ha. The hero laughed, walking forward to the scattered villain. The teen watched him go for a moment, before snapping out of it when he remembered what he had to do in this type of situation. All Might, could you give me your autograph? He asked, fishing a pen and his hero analysis notebook out of his backpack. The hero turned to him with a laugh. Sure thing, young man. He accepted the items and quickly wrote his signature under the impressive drawing the boy had made of him on his section of the notebook. I must say, these notes are quite impressive. I assume you want to be a hero in the future? Izuku nodded. I'm sure you'll go far. Izuku's eyes widened in shock at his idol's show of support. For now though, I'll restrain this villain right here. Don't you have anywhere to go? He asked dumbly before snapping out of it. Oh crap, I had to go buy groceries for Mom, but the villain made me late. He muttered in a slight panic. You have no idea how much I loved meeting you here today, All Might, but I really have to go. He called, turning to run. His run was accompanied by All Might's amused laugh. But instead of blushing in embarrassment, her grinned, remembering the hero's words of encouragement. All Might believes in me. 15 minutes later, Izuku found himself walking back home with the bag of groceries for his mom and his wide grin still on his face, riding the high of being complimented by his greatest hero. He sounded like a broken record by now, but come on. All Might said he could be a hero. He would be thinking about this for months. He hummed happily to himself, walking back towards his home without a care, but was snapped out of it by a nearby explosion shaking the ground under his feet. The boy's head snapped up and saw a plume of smoke rising to the skies from just a few streets down, and a small crowd formed right in front of the street it had happened. Well, I guess it couldn't hurt to give it a glance since I'll have to walk just by it anyways. He mused to himself before shrugging. Approaching the scene, Izuku absent-mindedly handed his bag to Luna as she manifested. Excuse me, what's going on? he asked one of the civilians when he reached the crowd. The woman turned to look at him for a second. A villain managed to take a middle schooler hostage and is somehow using his quirk to wreak havoc. She turned back to the fight, a bead of sweat going down her face in nervousness. It's been like this for a while, but between his quirk and the hostage the heroes can't do anything. Izuku frowned in worry and turned to his wolf. Hold the groceries for a bit, alright, I'll go to the front for a minute. Seeing his wolf's nod, he swiftly weaved through the crowd to reach the front and take a better look at the scene. Okay, so who did the villain to Bakugo? He thought incredulously. Well, that explains the explosions at least, but he frowned watching Kamui Woods, Death Arms, Backdraft and Mount Lady trying and failing to contain the situation. These heroes should be more than enough to rescue him if they coordinated better. He finished inside of his head. He watched the scene with a grimace, observing how hard Bakugo was struggling inside of the sludge. He's a JRK, but even he doesn't deserve this. The blonde's eyes looked around wildly, and when both of their gazes met, Izuku noticed how panicked they were, begging for help. Oh, for F's sake, Izuku sighed, already dashing forward and summoning his blade. Ignoring the hero's cries for him to stop, he started to strike the ground along his path to create as many fakes he could before he approached, channeling moondust between strikes. It wouldn't create as much dust as it would if he wasn't creating the blades, but even the small amount it created was going to help. The villain finally noticed his approach, eyes widening for a second before narrowing in fury. You! He snarled, sending forth a massive wave of sludge, not keen on giving the boy even a chance of fighting back. Narrowing his eyes, Izuku broke all of his blades into moondust and recalled it, condensing it around his blade. He lifted his sword up to the skies, dust writhing around it for a moment before bringing it down, Moonlit rend, and firing off an arc of dust forward, easily cleaving through the wave and opening a path for him to take. The wave continued forward for a moment before breaking down into over a dozen swords, some lost to maintain the attack. A loud bark sounded from behind him as Luna jumped over the crowd and dashed forward to join him in the fight. Upon seeing his familiar, Izuku got an idea and recalled 8 of his flying swords, swirling their dust around his blade. Luna, once you reach Bakugo, grab him and throw him back. The tumble is better than being asphyxiated. The rest of you, free him from the sludge so Luna can rescue him. His dust expanded as he prepared for another swing. Pack hunting order, loop and blast. He fired off 8 trails of dust that gained form almost as soon as they started flying, turning into 8 ethereal wolves similar to the already existing one. All his wolves let out an echoed bark and shot off towards the villain, with Luna on the back of the pack to let them do their work first. Each wolf easily dodged the tentacles of sludge that the villain had sent out to intercept them, and once they approached they each started to glow and impacted the villain, exploding on contact. The blasts weren't all that big, since they had only been conjured with a single blade each, but the first 7 impacts had moved enough sludge to dislodge Bakugo slightly. The 8th wolf noticed that the blasts had opened a space just under the hostage and slipped inside it, jumping up so that his explosion happened just behind the teen and fully freed him. Before he could do anything with his freedom, however, Luna clamped her jaw on his arm. She had dispelled her fangs as to not hurt him, and spun in the air, hurling him as far away from the villain as she could, just in time for him to escape the villain's reaching tentacle, which ended up dispelling Luna instead, the wolf letting out a pained yelp as he body broke in half. No! The villain screamed in outrage, glaring at the 2 boys. Deku, what the hell are you doing? Bakugo hissed, standing up with a wince. Saving your sorry but, you'd an ingrate. Izuku huffed, lifting his remaining swords plus the ones he had stopped to create while his summons rescued the blonde, making it 9 in total. Now get back, this is gonna be big. Brought his sword to his hip as if sheathed and prepared for a slash. Hit him from below, we don't want collateral damage. He intoned calmly, pulling the dust from his fake to the original for his next attack. The sludge villain rushed towards them and made himself as big as possible, ready to crash down on his victims. Izuku took a deep breath and slashed. Great Alpha! Before the energy had separated into multiple small wolves, but now all the energy formed into a single massive wolf, easily taller than most adults, who let out an enraged snarl as he stepped forward and met the wave of sludge head-on, stopping it in its tracks. The villain's eyes widened at the wolf's strength, but let out a cackle as his mass enveloped the star canine completely, hiding him from sight. "Ha, see. Now you can't do anything to stop me, you? What's with that look?" he asked, glee giving place to nervousness when he noticed Izuku's dismissive stare. Izuku just closed his eyes. "Who said we were done?" He turned and walked away, already knowing how things would end when he called for his next command. "Lupus. Nova. Howl." The villain felt most of the Star Wolf's body disappear from inside him, and looked down to see a light start to shine from inside his mass. What the? His eyes widened when he felt a burning sensation, his sludge starting to bulge outwards as the wolf's energy started to expand. What are you doing, Dedish?" He was cut off as his mass burst open, a giant beam of moonlight cutting through his body and reaching high towards the skies, impacting the few clouds that drifted along with the wind and dispelling them with the force of the impact it hit them with. It only lasted for a second before it faded, but by then the villain had been knocked out and the sky was cleared of any clouds, the sun shining down on the scene. The heroes watched the scene in shock over a random kid managing to take out the villain in such an spectacular way when they themselves could barely do anything against it. Izuku just ignored them, walking away from the scene without a care even as they shook themselves out of it and called for the boy. Suddenly his eyes snapped open, remembering the bag of groceries he had to bring to his mother that he had given to Luna, but the wolf had dropped it somewhere so she could join him on the rescue. A low bark caught his attention, and he sighed in relief when he saw Luna had resummoned herself and grabbed the bag from wherever she had hid it in. "Good girl." He chuckled, entering one of the side roads that led towards his home while the heroes scrambled to reach him. When they finally entered the street after him, he was nowhere to be seen. "I really love that trick." Izuku chuckled as he walked home after successfully escaping the heroes that were going to no doubt chastise him for interfering with the situation. People underestimate the things we can learn with the internet and a lot of trial and error. Luna nodded in agreement. "Deku." "Of course." He sighed and Luna growled slightly, amusement gone from both as they turned to face the boy's former friend. "Yes." Bakugo stopped a few meters away from the other boy. "I didn't need your help, you hear me? I had it under control, you BSTD." He shouted. "I'll be the greatest hero in the world. I don't need the help of people like you." He turned around and stomped away. Izuku watched him leave with tired eyes. "Whatever." He sighed, turning to walk away. "I am here," All Might announced, dashing from an alley to intercept him. "All Might." Izuku startled, stepping back for a second, Luna jumping between them in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk to you, of course." The hero laughed. "I saw what you did earlier. It was extremely reckless, young man, but I can't say it wasn't a good job." Izuku nodded but couldn't help but ask, "How did the villain escape you?" "I left you with him back in the tunnel." The man sighed. "I made a mistake and he capitalized on it. By the time I noticed he was long gone. Once I arrived you had already jumped in and was taking care of everything. Sending your wolves forward with those controlled explosions to free the hostage was very smart." He bowed his head slightly. "I feel like I should ask for forgiveness over getting you involved once again, though I must ask, why did you do it?" There were already heroes in the scene taking care of the situation. "Wouldn't put it like that, but sure." Izuku grumbled before looking him straight in the eyes. His eyes met mine before I moved, and they looked like they were begging for help. Next thing I noticed, I was already running with my sword in hand. All Might's eyes widened for a moment and he chuckled. "I see. So your legs moved on their own, huh?" "If I had any doubts," he trailed off. "What is your name, young man?" Izuku blinked. "Oh, my name is Midoriya Izuku, and this is Luna. She's a part of my quirk." The Star Wolf barked. All Might nodded. "I see. Young Midoriya, I must say something. I fully believe that you will become an amazing hero in the future, much like me and many of my colleagues in the top 10 heroes," he announced, shocking the boy once again. "And as such, All Might grinned widely and pounded his chest with a fist. My power is yours to inherit. Wow, even after hearing about it and accepting your offer, I'm still in a bit of disbelief. To think that your quirk can be passed down and that you want me to be the next holder, Izuku muttered in disbelief. There is a quirk for everything, huh? Yagi chuckled. You haven't seen anything, kid. He sighed. You really haven't. After their encounter on the day before, with Izuku's heroism and All Might's proposal, which Izuku instantly accepted, the hero gave the teen his phone number alongside instructions to meet him on the next day at 6 in the morning in Dagobah Beach, where the hero would then explain how they would spend the months leading to UA's entrance exam. So we're here. Izuku stated. What now? The skeletal man turned towards the beach and the hills of garbage that dominated its sands. You know, this beach used to be quite beautiful. Yeah, I think my mom mentioned it before. Izuku followed his gaze. Apparently the currents keep bringing trash from the sea here, and once the population noticed it, instead of cleaning the place they capitalized on it and turned it into a dumpster. He frowned. It's really disappointing, really. I'm glad you think that because you'll be cleaning it. He laughed when the teen whirled around to stare at him in shock. Nowadays being a hero is a proper job, with plenty of fighting villains and overall being as flashy as you can, but small things such as community service is just as important, in my honest opinion. Izuku calmed down, understanding the reasoning. The man turned to face the boy once again. And besides, we need to make sure your body is prepared to handle my quirk. Prepared? Of course. You'll be receiving my power in its entirety after all. If your body isn't able to handle it, your limbs would pop right off. Yagi laughed again as Izuku's shock came back full force. Right. He gulped. I assume hauling the trash will help me gain strength then? There are a lot of heavy things in there. Exactly. The hero nodded. However, I think it would be best if you explain to me exactly how your quirk works. That way we'll have an idea of how One for All will manifest within you. The teen blinked. I won't have the same powers as you? If 8 people had the exact same power, one appearing as soon as the other fell, people would put 2 and 2 together fairly quickly, don't you think? That's fair. Izuku took a deep breath. Alright, let's see. My quirk's name is Moonlit Edge, and the main aspect of it is that I can manifest a blade made out of lunar dust, and every time the blade connects with anything, it generates more moon dust that turns into a weaker copy of my main sword. After a long time training, I managed to figure out how to dissolve the fakes into moon dust and manipulate it, which I soon integrated into my sword arts, the special attacks that I used before against the Sludge villain. However, a few years after I discovered that my sword had a unique connection to the constellation of Lupus, granting me the ability to summon up to 9-star wolves, the same number of main stars that the constellation itself has, or to summon the constellation itself to aid me, but I can't do both at the same time. Lupus himself is fully sentient but doesn't really interact with me much. He prefers to stand back and observe until I call upon him. The others are only semi-sentient, as they have no personality and are only capable of following orders as efficiently as possible, but still have a little bit of intelligence to be able to actually carry out their tasks. He stopped for a moment, calling upon his familiar. Luna emerged with a bark and a wag of her tail as he kneeled down and scratched her head. Luna here is an exception. Lupus appointed her to act as my guardian and partner, and as such she bonded with me and developed a personality of her own using one of my emotions as a base. In her case, it was my curiosity. He stood back up, dismissing his familiar. And that's about it. Yagi hummed, running his chin. That's one hell of a quirk you have there, boy. I would assume One for All will increase the durability of your swords and maybe how many fakes you can create at a time, but I'm not sure how it'll interact with your wolves besides making them generally stronger. Maybe the rest will gain their own personalities like Luna? Izuku shrugged. In any case, now that we have an idea of what to expect, we can create a proper training routine for you. Go collect some of the trash while I alter the one I had already planned to fit in your quirk training. Oh, and no quirk, we're training your body first. Izuku nodded, walking down the stairs towards the sand to get started while the hero stood back and pulled a paper from his back pocket, sitting down on one of the benches at the edge of the beach. He looked down on the routine he had already written down and started to shift a few things around. Izuku grit his teeth as he pushed a pickup truck that someone had left on the beach for whatever reason, grunting with each step that he managed to take while moving the car. When he had found the vehicle for the first time, it was in the middle of the many trash piles that covered the location in a way that it would be completely impossible for him to take it out, so he had decided to leave it there for the time being and try again when he had opened up a path. Now, 6 months later, the path had finally been opened and he figured it would be a good idea to see if he could move the car, and he could. Barely. Nevertheless, it still made Yagi widen his eyes in surprise upon seeing his successor doing such a thing. "Holy crap," he muttered, receiving the boy's attention when he walked forward to join him. "Well, I certainly can't say I expected you to be able to move the car this early in your training." "More or less?" he panted, taking a moment from his task to regain his breath. "I mean, I can barely move it, and my arms are already dying even with how little distance I covered." He frowned when the hero suddenly began to laugh, not understanding why. "My boy, you moved a car that weighs over a ton, closer to 2 than 1 even. For over 12 meters. Izuku's eyes widened slightly and he turned, only now noticing that he was much farther from the original position than he thought he was. "Huh." Yagi's laughter trailed off into a chuckle, shaking his head in mirth. "Well, I think this is as good of a sign as any." He sobered up, looking at the boy dead in the eyes. "You are ready." Izuku's eyes widened for real this time. "Are you sure? I only cleaned up about 2/3 of the beach so far." At the hero's firm nod, he took a deep breath. "All right, how do we do this?" All Might smiled, buffing up to his hero form. "Young Midoriya, I have seen both your heroism and your willingness to better yourself, and these acts have both cemented my choice. I deem you ready and worthy of one for all. Now." He lifted a hand to his head, pulling a single strand. "Eat this." "What?" Izuku deadpanned, his face changing into one of repulsion. "You need to ingest some of my DNA to receive one for all." He explained. "So, unless you want to drink some of my blood, my hair is the best option. Come on now, eat. He laughed, shoving the hair in front of the boy's face. "Ugh, this isn't what I thought would happen at all," Izuku muttered as he pulled the hair and swallowed it with his face contorted in disgust, somehow managing to keep himself from hurling. So, what's going to happen?" he asked, accepting a bottle of water offered by the hero. Yagi let his hero form go, deflating into his civilian persona with a hum. "Your body needs to digest it first, so we have a few hours before one for all manifests itself inside of you. For now, how about you train a bit with your quirk? That way you'll be able to feel when the change occurs." Izuku nodded, walking away from the man and the trashed vehicle until he was near the shore, a few meters away from where the highest wave had reached. Taking a deep breath, he summoned his blade and started to run through his attacks with it, his movements soon starting to look like a deadly dance of blades and moondust. Though he couldn't stop thinking about the quirk that he was about to receive and how it would change his own. That particular train of thought led him to thinking of his own, as well as the day that it manifested and how happy he and his family were that day. "And then I pulled my sword and cut straight through the villain's shield, bashing him in the head and knocking him out for good." A tall man boasted to the small child in front of him. Izuku let out a happy gasp, throwing his hand up in glee. "And Dad saved the day," he shouted, making the man throw his head back in laughter, his wife muffling her own giggles with her hand. "Of course I did, I am the blazing arsenal. Hero Incendium." Hisashi laughed, picking his son and spinning him around for a moment before putting him back down, looking at his son's awed gaze. The man had been a hero for almost a decade now, using his flame forge quirk to a genuinely amazing degree. The only way he could create flames was from his fire breath, but once they were created he could manipulate them freely so long as they were in contact with his skin. Some would think it was a shame that he had such a limitation, but Hisashi just laughed at their faces and improved his quirk as far as he could, becoming able to increase the quantity of any fire he came in contact with, turning even small embers into burning infernos that would rival even Endeavor himself. However, instead of following the same path as the flame hero, he decided to use his flames to create a near unlimited arsenal of weapons, ranging from giant mallets to snake-like chains, but his signature weapon was certainly his sword, Devil Slayer. Izuku jumped happily. "When I grow up, I'll be a hero just like Dad," he proclaimed, fists on his hips and puffing up his chest in an imitation of a hero pose, making his parents chuckle once again. "I'm sure you will, dear." Inko smiled, already knowing that her son would follow on his promise no matter what. Izuku nodded excitedly. "And I'll have a sword too, and I'll use it to protect others like you do. I'll have my own Devil Slayer." He laughed, throwing his right fist up like he was holding a sword. What happened next was something that they all would remember for the rest of their lives. The little boy's entire body lit up like a beacon, shining silver for a moment as particles flew from his body and coalesced on top of his hand. All three present looked in shock as the particles started to take form, creating a beautiful silver and azure blue sword in the boy's hand, the blade giving off its own glow independent of the house's lighting. "Holy!" Hisashi breathed as his son's glow dimmed down, but the sword persisted. The word shook Izuku out of his own trance, and he jumped back with a yelp, releasing the sword in surprise. Both parents gasped in surprise, and the father reached out for it after a moment, but his hesitance made him too slow and the sword hit the floor pommel first, then falling down on its side. As soon as the blade made contact with the floor, it released a burst of light particles, startling them once again, which turned into confusion when the dust formed another sword. It cloned itself on impact? Izuku was the first to move, picking up the original blade gingerly. "Eyes, is this my quirk?" he asked, nervousness slowly turning into excitement. I got my quirk." He laughed happily, lifting the sword again. "Whoa, now watch where you swing that thing." His father laughed, clamping his hand around the flat edge while avoiding the sharp one. "Quirk or not, swords are dangerous. You have no idea how many times I cut myself with Slayer when I first trained with it. Mostly because I didn't have anyone to teach me." He scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Oh," Izuku muttered. He kept the blade low while his father picked up the clone that had been created by it. His grip on it tightened in excitement, and for a moment 9 small lights shone over the blade, lines connecting the dots in a specific pattern before they all faded, though they all managed to see it. "Huh." Izuku tilted his head in confusion. "That pattern," Inko hummed, pulling her cell phone. "I swear I've seen it before." "You look for it, for now me and Aizu will figure out what the sword is made of," Hisashi suggested, sitting on the sofa and bringing the copied blade close. Unlike the first, this one was completely see-through, showing small dots of light that shone from within whatever material it was made of. "It almost looks like stars." He frowned and grasped the blade harder, seeing how durable it was against his strength. It maintained itself for a second, but soon started to crack under the pressure of the hero's fist until it shattered into light particles again. He reached out and felt through them. "They're grainy, kind of like sand," he hummed. "And with the dots of light inside of it, stardust?" "No, star-related quirks always create some sort of heat, but these were cool to the touch." "Lunar dust, then?" He kept muttering under his breath for a moment with his son watching him curiously until his wife let out a triumphant cry. "Ah, I knew I had seen that pattern before." She grinned, turning her phone screen to show the three of them. "What's lupus?" Izuku asked, confused. "It's the constellation of the wolf." His mother explained. "That's what lupus means, wolf in Latin." At her husband's amused stare, she coughed. "Stargazing used to be a hobby of mine when I was younger, and I learned some of the constellations, even the ones we can't see from Japan. So a moon dust sword that makes other swords upon impact and has some sort of connection to a constellation in the sky." He chuckled. "That's some quirk you have there, son. So, what are you going to call it?" Izuku hummed. "Moon sword." "Wait, no, that's too obvious." "Moon blade? Moon edge? I like that one a bit, but not that much. Maybe something close to it? Moonlight edge? That feels close, but I don't know a good word." He muttered under his breath. Hisashi muffled a laugh over his son's muttering and the small glare his wife sent his way. "How about moonlit?" "It means illuminated by the moon," she explained. The boy gasped. That's it. Moonlit Edge. Thanks, Mom, I love it. He exclaimed, hugging her with the arm that wasn't holding his sword. Hisashi chuckled. That's great and all, but that's not what I meant. When his son turned towards him in confusion, he continued. Moonlit Edge is the name of your quirk, but what is the name of your sword? You can't just leave something so important unnamed, after all. Izuku looked down at his blade with a pensive expression. The name of my sword. Hey Mom, how do you say moon in that language? He asked. Inko raised an eyebrow and smiled, typing on her phone. I think this is the best way to phrase what you are thinking about. She showed him the screen, and he nodded. Okay, got it. He nodded firmly, raising his sword again. I have the perfect name for you. Luni Lupus. At that moment, he swore he could feel the blade smile. He knew now that the smile he had felt was Lupus, the sentient constellation that had manifested inside of his sword, and in turn, Izuku himself. He smiled, bringing an end to his deadly dance by lifting every blade he had formed within the time he spent dancing and spinning them in their own axis before pointing their tips towards the sea. Each blade started to shine brightly as they channeled energy, and Izuku released them with a slash. Meteor storm. Each blade turned into streaks of light as they were sent rocketing forward, impacting with enough force to cut them in half. Izuku smiled, knowing that he wouldn't be able to do such a thing before his training without fusing swords together. A blast of wind and water brought him back to reality, and he looked up in surprise, finally noticing that the sky was taken over by a giant dark cloud that rained down heavily on the beach. How the hell did I miss that? And for the record, how did it get this bad so fast? It wasn't like that earlier. First, you were just that distracted. Yagi called out, walking towards him under his umbrella and with another one on his other hand, which he handed to the boy. And second, you've been training for over 2 hours now. I tried to call you before the rain hit, but it seems you couldn't hear me. He chuckled at the boy's surprised face. Why aren't I wet then? He looked down on his body, showing that he was mostly dry, as if the only time he had been rained on was at the end of his training. The man decided to explain. As soon as the rain came, you created some sort of dust dome over you, and it protected you from the rain. I thought you couldn't make constructs other than your swords and wolves. And I can't. It sounds like it was just a barrier of sand instead of a proper construct, kind of like my flying slashes. He mused. That gives me an idea for a technique, actually. He choked on his words, bringing a hand to his chest in surprise. Young man. Yagi cried out in surprise. Are you all right? Why yeah, I think so. Izuku breathed in deep and focused his attention on his own body. I think one for all finally manifested. Maybe that was the energy mixing with my own quirk. Well, the timing would line up for something that small at least. Yagi commented. Well, I guess there is only one way to figure it out, huh? Izuku nodded, calling upon Luni Lupus once again. As soon as the blade formed, he gasped. Holy crap, it has so much more energy than before. He did one of his usual swings with the blade while trying to summon as much dust as he could, and stared in awe at the wave of dust that trailed after the blade. That was a full blade worth of dust. I was never able to create this much without at least 2 rotations. He quickly struck the ground, creating a fake sword. Still just one though. If you created that much dust with a swing, I bet you created even more with the strike. Yagi hummed. And since it still formed a single sword, you can bet that it will be much more durable than before. And with more dust and a more durable blade, my sword arts will be even stronger now. Izuku nodded before his eyes widened. Wait, Luna. Come here, girl. A spiral of dust was created a meter away from Izuku, and his mouth fell open in awe once again upon seeing his wolf. Before she was just a simple construct of moon dust that looked almost ethereal, as she was completely see-through despite being completely solid. Now, however, she looked like an actual star wolf, a being covered in dark blue fur that turned azure at the edges of her figure. He was confused by that detail for a moment, until he noticed that her outer mass was still see-through, but she had so much mass inside of her that instead of showing whatever was beyond her figure, It instead showed the galaxy that formed the Wolfus. "You're beautiful," Izuku breathed out. Luna let out a happy bark and jumped up at him, liking his face, and only now he noticed that she was much larger than before. The previous Luna was slightly taller than his waist in her familiar form, summoning her by herself without using any extra dust, and she barely reached his face while standing on her hind legs, but now? She easily towered him in her hind legs, and once he calmed her enough for her to back away and stand on all fours, he realized that the tip of her ears reached almost as tall as he was. That was the same height as Lupus himself when summoned at 9 stars. If this was only 1 star, he was honestly scared to see how big the constellation himself was. "Huh, that's something that you don't see every day," Yagi commented, approaching the wolf. Luna looked at him and booped his chest with her snout, gaining a surprised laugh from the man, who reached out with his hand and petted her. He looked up and noticed something, smirking slightly. "Well, I guess there's one more thing you need to test, no?" He nodded in the direction of the sea. Izuku followed his gaze, and after a moment watching the water he noticed what he meant. The winds caused by the rain were making the sea behave much more violently than normal, a few relatively big waves coming forth and easily passing the line where the highest wave had reached before, coming centimeters from the group. On the distance, however, Izuku could see the water starting to swell much earlier than the others, and he knew it would only gather more water and end up as a massive wave. Izuku nodded in understanding and stepped forward as Yagi retreated and Luna dispelled, already spinning his sword in order to create as much moondust as he could. The smaller waves, which still were quite big, impacted against his legs and chest the further he walked forward. None were able to stop the boy that didn't seem to even notice them, keeping his eyes trained on his target. A full minute passed and now the wave was almost upon him, the water on the beach retreating back into it to make it even higher as it reached its breaking point, and he knew the wave that reached almost double his height was going to fall right on top of him. Izuku stopped spinning his blade, retreating the lunar desert worth of moondust he had created back into his sword as he raised it, and as soon as the wave was about to hit him, he swung Looney Lupus down. And before his eyes, the ocean parted. Izuku took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves before he left for the exam despite knowing that he was more than ready for it. Even without taking one for all into consideration, he had spent every single moment these past 10 months training to his limits, and the quirk was just the cherry on top of the newfound power cake. His stomach growled, making him chuckle slightly. "I really should go. Eat already." He sighed again, turning towards his mirror to inspect himself. Even before he had started to train for One for All, he was a very fit person, though not that muscular as his training at the time focused more on speed and technique than strength, something that All Might had changed for him. And the results of that change were apparent, as not only his muscles were much bigger than they were before, a clear proof of his strength, but he had grown a bit taller as well, now reaching 173 centimeters of height. Still not that tall, but he at least was taller than Bakugo now, even if only by a single centimeter. The blonde wasn't amused. Moving from his height, his gaze trailed towards something else that had changed in the boy once he had gained his new quirk, or at least something that the quirk had accelerated. Ever since he had first manifested his quirk, his eyes and hair had been steadily changing color at the edges, starting green and gradually turning a shade of blue only slightly lighter than his blade's deep azure. But as soon as he gained the other quirk, the rate of changing had increased dramatically as well as been slightly altered. His irises had turned into a bright green that transitioned into a deep blue midway and occasionally sparkled in the light, and his dark green hair's color change had gained a trait similar to his wolf familiar, the main mass being green but transitioning into azure at the edges, no matter from which direction you looked from. He passed his hand on his hair, noticing it returning to his green mass with the exception of the very spots his hand touched, and then returned to what it was before as soon as his limb left his head. He chuckled again, shaking his head. "Quirks are bullshit, man." He turned to leave his bedroom, but as he was reaching towards the door handle it turned on its own, the door opening to reveal a tall man on the other side. "Hey, how's my little wolf?" Hisashi grinned, walking in to give the boy a hug. "Hey, Dad." Izuku smiled, returning the hug. "I thought you were going to sleep in today, with how late you returned yesterday. And miss my son leaving to finally accomplish his dream? Hell no, He laughed as they broke off. I wanted to make sure you were ready for your day myself, so I sent your mom back to back and decided to make you breakfast today. We're eating like kings this morning. His son joined in on his laughter with a chuckle, shaking his head slightly. The man recomposed himself after a few moments, clearing his throat. That said, that's not all I wanted to talk to you about. The boy perked up. What is it, Dad? It's nothing serious, just a little gift to give you luck. He reached in his back pocket, picking up an item and throwing it at the boy, who snatched it before it could hit his face without so much as a flinch. Izuku smirked slightly at his father's approving nod before looking down at his gift, letting out an almost inaudible gasp once he unfurled it completely. It was a piece of fabric twice as long as he was tall, and wide enough to cover his face if he rested his head on it. The entire thing looked like a galaxy, mostly a dark shade of blue that transitioned into a dark purple in a few places and littered with small, near imperceptible dots representing stars. Paying a bit more attention, he noticed that a few of these dots were connected with each other, forming multiple lupus constellations along the entire garment. The edges of the scarf were styled to look tattered, as if old and worn, but near it was a much more prominent lupus constellation, and turning the fabric showed him a tribal depiction of the head of a wolf howling skywards. Hisashi approached again and took the scarf, wrapping it around his son's neck in a way that left a huge lump of fabric right under his face and two asymmetrically long tails, hanging from the back that almost reached down to the back of his knees. Izuku stepped back and looked at himself in the mirror again. He had to admit that the scarf looked a bit out of place with his school uniform, but it still looked amazing. He faced his dad once again, who was watching him with a self-satisfied smirk on his face, and smiled. Now I'm ready. No, I'm not. He muttered nervously, staring at the massive building in front of him. The building that he would hopefully be enrolled at in just a few months. Taking a deep breath for the upteenth time that day, he raised his scarf slightly to better obscure the lower portion of his face and stalked forward without making a sound. He watched as his peers' eyes glided over him without ever focusing on his figure, smirking slightly. Useful skill is useful, but I'm still not good enough to fool perception-increasing quirks. I'm kinda surprised that no one is Nodi, Ohio there. He thought as he locked eyes with another applicant. They were wearing an oversized black hoodie over their school uniform, gray jeans pants, and white ombre shoes. The hood was pulled over their head, obscuring their features from any observer, except for two in particular, red eyes that seemed to glow from within the darkness, and a pale yellow beak that poked out slightly from under the hood. Izuku had noticed that their eyes had passed over him at first, but then snapped back to face him a moment later, watching in confusion. He lowered his head under his scarf a bit more, watching as the person's eyes unfocused slightly, and then refocused on him, now watching in surprise and interest. Izuku nodded in greeting, which the other returned, and they both walked towards their exams in silence. 3 hours later, Izuku walked inside of UA's auditorium, already finished with the written exam and more than confident that he had passed with a high score. He looked around for his seat and sighed once he found it, as well as who he would need to sit next to. Deku. Bakugo grunted, also looking less than content with it. Bakugo. Izuku greeted, sitting down and promptly ignoring the other boy. He looked around for a moment, and finally located the person from earlier sitting about 7 rows down. I really need to talk to whoever that is. It's not every day someone can notice me that easily. I wonder what their quirk is. He mused inside his head. For all you young listeners tuning in, welcome to UA's entrance exam. Present Mike announced from the podium, snapping Izuku out of his thoughts. Now everybody say, hey. Silence followed his request. What a refined response. He laughed. Well, since we're all that eager. For the practical exam, I'll start us off and explain how it'll work really quickly. Are you ready? Another wave of silence followed, and he chuckled slightly. All right. As written in your application requirements, the practical will be a 10 minutes long mock urban battle. Your applications show you which test site you'll have your test at, so pay attention and be sure not to enter the wrong bus. That happens surprisingly often. Izuku looked down on his application, noticing that he was assigned to Testing Grounds D. Then, so I won't be able to blow you up, huh? Bakugo muttered by his side, and he noticed the blonde was on ground. They probably don't want friends helping each other. Izuku hummed. Doesn't apply to us, but still. Don't look at my things, fucker. HN. Behind present mic, the auditorium screen lit up and showed the silhouettes of 3 machines, each with the numbers 1, 2, and 3 over them. There are 3 types of robots stationed in each site, all with a value of points between 1 and 3 on them, signifying how powerful they are, in a sense. Either immobilize or destroy them to gather points. Simple, huh? Of course, attacking other examinees and any other unheroic action is strictly prohibited and will remove points from your score. Izuku pointed at Bakugo with a deadpan stare. Ha! The other boy growled in fury. Excuse me, may I ask a question? A tall teenager interrupted, standing up. It says on the printout that there are 4 robots involved in the entrance exam, not 3. If it was a misprint, then the staff of UA should be ashamed. Also, you there with the spiky blonde hair. He turned to glare at Bakugo. Stop making so much noise, it's distracting everyone present. If you aren't going to take this seriously, then you should just leave so that the rest of us can take our exam in peace. Bakugo's expression went from incredulous to barely contained rage, but before he could even open his mouth to tell the other boy off, Izuku smirked beside him. Ha! He chuckled as the boy's eye started to twitch rapidly, so much murderous rage going through his system that his body was stuck in place, not sure of who to kill first. Present Mike wasn't going to give him to decide. Well catched, examinee number 7111, but you should have just waited until I spoke about it. The hero laughed, startling Bakugo out of his trance, who just sat back with a low snarl. Another robot appeared on screen, this time with a 0 in front of it. In truth, the 0-pointer isn't a robot you are supposed to face, it's just an obstacle worth nothing that'll cause chaos wherever it passes. Just avoid it and you'll be alright. The tall boy nodded in understanding and sat back down. And that's about it, dear listeners. I'll let you leave for your exams as soon as I present you our school's motto. As Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. He smiled. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Izuku nodded, standing up and leaving discreetly without being seen by most people in the auditorium, a few students with perception quirks being aware of his position but just dismissing him as another UA hopeful. All but 3, a bird person that had seen his ability before, the hero at the podium, and another hero hidden in the shadows of the auditorium. Izuku and his group soon found themselves before the entrance of Testing Grounds D, waiting for the practical exam to start. He stood separated from the group, his eyes closed as he prepared himself for the task he would have to complete in a few minutes. Opening his eyes, he gazed over his competition, observing what they each were capable of. One was a girl with shoulder-length black hair and a neutral expression that was counting small objects on her hand as if one was counting ammo, and another was a black-haired boy with a large grin 2 cylinders in his elbows. Izuku watched them curiously, wondering what their quirks could be, looking away again, noticing a person in specific. They're here too. He mused, watching the person who had managed to see him at the entrance. They were using similar clothes from before, but the jeans pants were replaced by dark blue pants that seemed to be made out of a different material from before, and the hood was pulled down, revealing the head of a raven. They seem pretty cool, maybe I should dash? Start. The group turned in surprise towards present Mike, who was grinning down at them from his spot on top of the wall surrounding the area. What? There are no countdowns in real life, go go go. Izuku turned an amused stare towards the other applicants, who were scrambling to reach the robots first while he calmly walked. Hey present Mike, my quirk has a summoning aspect to it. He shouted, gaining the hero's attention. If I let them loose, will I receive the points they gather? Yes, after all they are part of your quirk. The hero informed him. Oh, is that so? Great, he smirked, summoning his blade and spinning it in his hand for a moment. All of you, go to the edges of the area and destroy 10 robots each. We want to leave some for the competition after all. After that, return back here and wait for me. Pack hunting order. He swung his blade, shooting 8 trails of moondust towards the sky, where they curved to different parts of the arena before turning into wolves as they fell. He turned to his remaining wolf, who had materialized by his side in confusion when she wasn't sent with the others. "Hey girl, mind giving me a ride?" Luna grinned. Moments later, Izuku and Luna were tearing down their way down the roads, the boy letting out joyful cries as his star wolf jumped over astonished applicants before he jumped off of her, falling on top of a stray two-pointer blade first and piercing through his metal plates, destroying the internal wiring and taking it out. "You go join the others, girl. I can take care of this." Luna nodded and turned towards a side street, biting off the head of a one-pointer as she went. Pulling Looney Lupus off the robot and snatching the fake the attack had created, he kicked off the two-pointer and towards a one-pointer, dissolving the fake in order to cover his original in moondust while pulling it close. Crescent sever. A quick slash and the robot was easily cut in half, the fake sword the impact would have created being absorbed to maintain the sword art. Maintaining the enchantment passively was probably the best thing I came up with, heh. He chuckled, turning to run towards a three-pointer. The robot turned towards him and opened fire, rubber bullets tearing through the air to impact the boy. Letting go of the dust in his sword in order to create another, he grabbed it and spun both of his blades in front of him as he approached, blocking the projectiles before it could hurt him. Jumping to the side, he kicked off a light pole and prepared for a ranged attack, but the robot decided to change his strategy and fired off two rockets in his direction. Eyes widening, he changed tactics and spun a veil of moondust around his body. Sky mirror. The rockets exploded against the barrier, creating a great curtain of smoke obscuring the boy from the machine. The robot's lenses whirled as it tried to find the boy, but the smoke was too dense for it to see his opponent. Moonlit rend. Until a great crescent of moondust cut through the smoke and flew towards the robot, who couldn't do anything to avoid it and was cut straight through the middle. Izuku stepped out of the smoke with a satisfied smile, but it disappeared once he reached the destroyed bot and properly inspected it. Instead of cutting it from side to side, the slash had only cut through half of the robot, most of it being a smooth but turning jagged at the end, as if it was ripped open instead of severed. So my flying slash isn't powerful enough to cut straight through without having to charge, huh? I bet that if I hadn't had one for all, I wouldn't have been able to cut through the plates even with my crescent sever without having to constantly charge it. He thought a bit nervously. He still would have been able to pass by aiming at the joints instead of the main body, but still. It was a bit sobering to see that even with the second quirk, he still wasn't extremely powerful. Alright then. He muttered under his breath, looking around to find more targets. Once he located a cluster of robots, he smirked, pulling another blade and enhancing both. Let's ace this. Anyone know where these wolves came from on Site D? Snipe asked as he stared at the multiple screens that featured a star wolf in it. His fellow heroes of the UA staff shrugged, not having an answer themselves. Oh, a young listener summoned them. He even asked if the points they gathered would count for his own score. Present Mike answered as he sat down, having entered the room just as the gunslinger asked his question. Green and blue hair, large scarf, wields a sword, you can't miss, there he is. He pointed towards a screen in specific. Let's see, Blood King mused, going through the files of the applicants. Found it. Midoriya Izuku Quirk, Moonlit Edge. Grants him the power to summon a sword out of moondust that can create other swords, and these, fakes, can be dissolved into pure dust. The blade has a connection to the constellation of Lupus, and as such he can turn the dust into star wolves as well. Up to 9 smalls or 1 singular giant, but he can't have both out at the same time. He whistled. That's one hell of a quirk. And he seems to be rather skilled in using it as well. Midnight commented with a grin, watching the boy manifest his dust shield followed by a flying slash. This year's group seems rather promising, no? Nedzu nodded, a steaming cup of tea in his paws. Yes, I would say so. None of the examinees have been informed of the number or location of the villains, and have only a very limited span of time to gather as many points as they can in such a vast area. He sipped from his tea, watching as the year's hopefuls fought to the best of their abilities. Mobility, information gathering, unwavering will, and sheer battle prowess. Those are the traits necessary to keep peace on the streets, and as such are the main points tested in this exam. Yes, however, Yagi commented from the side where he was just observing, not involved in the grading process as he technically wasn't part of the UA staff yet. There is one trait in specific that is even more important for a great hero, the spirit of self-sacrifice. How about we see how many of them possess it? He asked, eyeing a red button in the panel in front of the principal of UA. Nedzu nodded in agreement, slamming his paw down on it with a cackle. During the entirety of the exam, Izuku had gone into what can only be described as a rampage, tearing into robots left and right as he ran through the streets of the testing site. Every once in a while he would find another applicant and would stop to observe them as they fought, taking mental notes on their quirks as they did. He found the two people he had seen at the entrance too, seeing the girl hurl pieces of the scrap and rubble that she had collected along the test and making them grow in massive size, crashing into the robots with enough force to explode them on impact, and the boy with the cylindrical elbows firing off ribbons of tape that he used to swing around the building with great skill, immobilizing robots as he passed and almost never touching the ground. The only other examinee that he had seen was on his testing ground but never found during the exam itself was the bird person, and he was genuinely curious about what their quirk was. Was it enhanced senses due to the bird head? It would explain a few things, for sure. Shrugging, he stood up from the pile of scrap that he was sitting on, which was once a three-pointer. That's about 37 points. I probably would have gathered more if I hadn't stopped to observe, but I'll have at least 90 points if my wolves manage to destroy 10 robots each like I told them to. He looked around from over his scarf, trying to see if there were any surviving machines. Looks like they were all destroyed already. Time to return then. He dispelled his sword and stretched before turning on his heel and walking towards the entrance, using Luna's presence as a guide. Before he could take more than a few steps, however, a powerful explosion rocked the ground under his feet, revealing a robot taller than even the buildings around him. The robot looked around at the shocked faces of the participants for a second before lashing out with an arm, destroying the top of a building and snapping everyone out of their trances. All applicants turned to run away from the robot, some screaming in fright, but Izuku just observed it with a curious expression. Ding, UA has a lot of money. He commented blandly. Well, no point standing here. He trailed off, noticing a figure pinned by the rubble of the robot's appearance. Narrowing his eyes, he noticed that it was the bird person, who seemed to create a shadowy figure from his body to lift the rubble as the robot approached. Izuku relaxed, figuring that they would be able to escape, but before the shade could lift the rock, another piece of rubble fell on top of it, destroying it with a shriek of pain. The bird's eyes watched it happen with barely concealed horror, but it turned into fear once they heard the booming footsteps of the approaching robot. Sheet! Izuku cursed, already running towards the behemoth. I don't doubt that this thing is even stronger than the small ones, and I could barely cut them with my sword, so I'll have to use Lup Dash. He stopped, eyes widening. My wolves are still out there, I can't summon him. Thinking fast, he decided to gather as much power as he could and summon his sword with it, already spinning it to gather even more power before he reached the giant. I'll need to get close enough so that my Moonlit Rend will lose as little energy as possible between leaving my blade and reaching it. On the corner of his eye, the bird person finally noticed his approach, eyes widening when they noticed his path and the apparent disk of solid power by his side. Izuku felt a surge of energy bubble up from within him and went with it, stopping his blade spin and grouching slightly on his next step, and then jumping up much higher than he should be able to, spinning in the air as he prepared for his slash. His scarf started to glow alongside his blade as it waved in the air while coiled around him, making it seem as if he was creating 3 trails of energy instead of just the one created by his sword. The robot finally noticed him as he came closer and closer, but even as it prepared his arm to slap the boy away, Izuku was too fast and swung his sword diagonally with a roar, firing off a massive wave of energy towards his target, just as he planned. But instead of forming a crescent slash, he watched as if in slow motion as the crescent split in itself, the energy shifting to form a cross-shaped blast. The moment it did, the energy pulsed for a second before growing into a powerful white trail that started to spiral around itself, quickly taking shape in the short distance between the blade and its target. and forming a giant eastern dragon, who roared its manifestation to the world as it impacted the robot and passed straight through its chest, the song of steel being cut joining the creature's triumphant cry, who disappeared as soon as the tip of his tail left the robot's insides. Curiously enough, the robot seemed completely unharmed for a moment, but that soon changed when it fell apart from two cuts perpendicular to each other, forming a giant X that mirrored the slash that dug into it. Izuku watched it all happen in shock, eyes trailing towards his blade and noticing that it wasn't Looney Lupus. Instead of the deep azure blade, this one was an Arctic blue instead, a shade that is often used in the depiction of diamonds in media, and for a moment he saw 14 stars appear over it, lines connecting them in a pattern. That's Draco, he muttered in awe. Before he could say anything else, the world's pace returned to normal and he felt gravity reassert itself, breaking him out of his trance and reminding him of where exactly he was. He turned in the air to face the ground, the dragon blade held tightly on his right hand. Alright, new sword or not, I can still use my sword arts. I'll just use a quick blunted Moonlit rend and the impact will create a small shockwave that should break my His thoughts were interrupted by a cracking noise. Turning towards his new sword, he saw a crack running down its length, light shining from it. A second crack appeared from the first, and in a moment the entire thing seemed to be barely holding together, making Izuku's eyes widen. Oh sure dash. He tried to throw the blade away from himself, but was a bit too slow and the blade shattered with a deafening explosion, throwing him to the side in an uncontrollable spin that would most definitely hurt him severely when he made contact with the ground. The explosion shook the bird person out of their shock, who quickly saw the trajectory of his fall. Morrigan! I got it! The shadow called back when it manifested, darting through the air and creating two claws of darkness to catch the teenager before he could hit the ground, grunting with the strain of receiving such an impact on such a bright day. That was one hell of a stunt you pulled off, dear. The Quirk commented while bringing him down. Didn't know I had it in me. He chuckled dazedly. Literally. The shadow put him on the ground before going back to its origin and moving the rubble away from its partner, freeing them from their prison. They stood up with a wince when they put a leg on the floor, and the shadow put its arms on them to keep their balance. As soon as they arrived by the boy's side, they sat down beside him. Time's up. Present Mike called from the entrance, announcing the end of the exam. Izuku and the bird sighed, the exhaustion of the test catching up to them in an instant. Izuku crossed his arms and put them over his knees, resting his head on them with closed eyes as he tried to regain his breath. He heard the noise of a zipper and the rustling of fabric from his side, followed by a sigh of relief. What a day, huh? He commented. That got a chuckle out of his peer. That's a massive understatement. He lifted his head and turned to his side as soon as the melodious voice reached his ears, noticing that the bird had taken off the hoodie completely and left it on the floor behind her, revealing a rose and black-colored sports bra. She was propping herself on her arms, head turned skyward and eyes closed, breathing slowly to catch her breath. He shook his head. Well, I'm glad you're all right at least. He smiled, extending a hand. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Her eyes opened, rose-colored irises trained on him, and the corners of her beak turned upward in a slight smile as she lifted a hand to grasp his own. My name is Tokoyami Miyako. It's a pleasure to meet you. The teachers watched the entire scene unfold. The emergence of the arena trap, the girl pinned by the rubble, Nedzu had the off switch in pause, just in case, and Izuku's show of heroism, which had surprised all heroes present who didn't think the kid with a sword would think of taking on the humongous robot. And then the dragon appeared. The file did say he could only create wolves, right? Snipe asked in shock. Yes, it did. But King answered eventually. He looked surprised. Ectoplasm spoke up. I think this is the first time he used this power. Nedzu observed the screen with interest, eyes gaining a spark that genuinely scared most of the heroes present. The Draco. It seems his quirk can connect to more than just one constellation after all. I want him in my class. Eraserhead spoke up for the first time, eyes scanning the screen intently. Both of them. His eyes shifted to the raven-headed girl, having seen her react fast to catch the boy. He had seen how she had used the quirk during the exam, and he knew she had barely tapped into her quirk's capabilities. Nedzu only sipped from his tea, but a twitch of his ear told the hero that he had heard him. Recovery Girl sighed. I think it's about time I went down to do my job. I'll start with Saito first. I bet that girl's leg must be more damaged than she made it seem. Luna whined, still inspecting every inch of his body, making Izuku laugh. Luna, I already said I'm fine. Recovery Girl took care of my wounds earlier. I'm good as new. She had been doing this ever since they had left the testing grounds 15 minutes ago. The wolfess whined again, but relented. Here, I made some new friends today. This is Tokoyami, she helped me earlier. He pointed to the bird girl, who was walking alongside them, watching the scene with a mix of amusement and interest, once again wearing her trusty hoodie. Luna looked at her, head tilted. It's a pleasure to meet you, Luna. Tokoyami smiled, patting the giant star wolf in the head before locking eyes with Izuku. I see you can manifest your own inner beast as well. I'd like you both to meet my own partner, Morrigan. The shade emerged from the girl, a giant stain in reality vaguely shaped like its master, exuding power as it grew larger and larger, matching the wolf in size. Yo! It greeted. Yo! Izuku greeted back with a nod and Luna barked by his side. Fitting name. Thank you, yours too. Tokoyami complimented and dismissed her partner, Izuku following her lead and dispersing his familiar. I'd like to thank you for earlier. Morrigan is severely weakened in bright places, so that rubble was enough to destroy her form, and when that happens she is knocked out for a good few seconds. I doubt I would have been able to escape if you hadn't stopped the robot when you did. I wouldn't be much of a hero if I had abandoned you there. He shrugged it off. I didn't expect to receive a new blade at that moment, though. I've always used my lupus sword, but that was Draco. He muttered, staring at his hand. And it felt so much different as well. Tokoyami frowned. How so? Luni lupus is made out of moon dust, but that blade felt like energy. Crystallized energy in the shape of a blade. He sighed. And just when I thought I had my quirk nearly mastered as well. In truth, he knew exactly what had happened. Somehow, when he called upon his power to attack the robot, he had passed Moonlit Edge and went straight for one for all, manifesting it as a blade by mistake. However, the power had somehow formed a bond with the Draco constellation much like his original quirk had done with Lupus, and now he had a secondary blade to get used to. And apparently the blade has enough power that it literally cannot contain it for more than a second. Fun. Sounds to me like your quirk evolved due to stress. The voice of his new friend brought him out of his thoughts. The Lupus constellation must have not been sufficient to handle the situation, and so it reached for a more powerful one. Izuku snorted. Oh no, Lupus would have been more than able to one-shot that thing if I charged it. He shook his head. I just decided to try and cheese the exam and it came back to bite me in the butt. I sent my wolves to gather points by themselves, and with them summoned I can't manifest the main constellation. Why didn't you dispel them, then? She asked. I can feel them, but the only one I can dispel from a distance is Luna because she has a special connection with me. The others need either be inside of a 20-meter area around me, or within my field of vision. I see. The duo continued walking together in silence, both comfortable with each other's presence by their side. Izuku's eyes traveled across their path towards the exit of the school, and he noticed a person in specific in the path ahead. Ah, damn it. He cursed under his breath, Tokoyami turning to look at him curiously. Keep going, I'll be gone for a moment. Her head tilted slightly, but she nodded and turned back towards her path. Izuku took a deep breath and retreated his head under his scarf, to the point where his eyes were barely over the fabric. And then he was gone. Tokoyami startled, turning to see his spot for a moment and then scanning the area around her, but she then frowned and kept going, passing other applicants, including a blonde-haired, red-eyed one that seemed extremely pleased with himself, if the feral smirk in his face was anything to go by. She exited the school and turned in the opposite direction the blonde had gone, walking casually towards her home. Well, that would have gone badly. Izuku sighed from her side, making her jump slightly in surprise again. How in the abyss did you do that? She hissed. I didn't even notice you approaching. Who said I ever left? He smirked before raising an eyebrow. On that note, how in the void did you see me when I did it earlier? Tokoyami frowned. My raven head might not be much more than a mutation from my mom's quirk, but it still gives a vision sharper than most. So you can imagine my surprise when I find I can barely see a person less than 10 meters away from me. That's pretty cool. Izuku's smirk turned into a genuine smile. Well, to simplify things, our senses are geared to perceive the presence of things more than their actual appearance. If your eyes can't detect someone's presence, it'll think nothing's there and fool your brain into ignoring it. All I did was suppress mine, though a few perception quirks are still able to see or hear me even when I do it. You erased your presence? She asked in disbelief. Suppressed. He corrected her. Perception quirks can still see me even when I suppress it as far as I can, so I can't in good conscience call it erasing. His smirk widened. Yet. That's wow. The bird girl shook her head. A moment passed and she averted her eyes slightly. Could you teach me? Izuku looked at her for a few seconds before grinning. Sure, it'd be my pleasure. She looked him in the eyes and nodded. Give me your phone for a second. He took the device, unlocked it and passed it to her. She took it and added her own number to it before handing it back to him. Send me a message later. Sure. He smiled, which soon turned into a smirk that he hid under his scarf. Well, today went much better than I hoped. I did a great job in the exam, my quirk awakened, and now I got the number of a cute girl. Tokoyami's eyes widened and she sputtered for a moment, but before she could open her beak to say anything the boy was gone, having used her distraction to slip away. She looked around to try and locate him, but wasn't successful. She huffed and started to walk back towards her home, thanking every god for the fact that she had a black plumage to cover her blush. Morrigan appeared by her side. Oh! Morrigan, no. Tokoyami groaned. Oh come on, you what I saw, that guy is hot. The quirk smirked. And pretty cute too. Kinda unfair, really. And I only just met him. She said forcefully. Didn't stop him, cutie. The shade cackled as it retreated. The raven groaned, knowing her partner would be insufferable for the rest of the day. What a mad banquet of darkness. Izuku was still chuckling slightly by the time he arrived home, shaking his head at the memory of the girl's reaction. He pulled his key from his pocket and unlocked the front door, slipping inside and dropping his backpack on top of the sofa. I'm home, he shouted. He could hear sounds coming from the kitchen and knew that his mom was finishing putting the table for lunch, the smell of katsudon reaching his nose a second after, making his stomach grumble. She walked out of the kitchen as soon as she heard his voice, walking towards him with a large smile. Izuku, I was hoping you would return soon. She hugged him, which he returned immediately. I made your favorite dish for the occasion. I noticed it smells great. He grinned, breaking out of the hug. Ah, there he is. His father approached. So, how was the exam? Yet, straight to the point. We already know you passed, I just want to know if anything interesting happened. Oh, you have no idea. Izuku chuckled. He stepped back and raised both his hands, trying his best to summon the Draco sword with as little power as possible, as to not have it explode. The diamond-colored blade flickered over his hands for a second before solidifying, manifesting its stars for a moment. His mom gasped and his father's mouth fell open in surprise, making Izuku grin, but that single momentary loss of concentration was enough for the blade to burst, making him wince slightly. You really don't, he muttered, glaring at the place the blade had been. Well then, looks like you'll have a great story to tell us over lunch. The man commented, amused. Yeah. Izuku smiled sheepishly. I also made a new friend today. She's cool. She. Hisashi raised an eyebrow. She. Inko repeated with a growing grin and a twinkle in her eyes. Mom, no. Mom, yes. A second constellation, Hisashi muttered in awe, staring at the star formation hovering over Izuku's hand. His son's face was scrunched up in concentration, trying with all his might to hold the illusion together, but even so it burst after a few seconds. And a feisty one at that. It's giving you that much trouble? The family had finished their lunch and was sitting in the living room. Izuku had already recounted everything that had happened in the exams, from meeting Tokoyami before the exams to saving her from the zero-pointer. Inko had been ecstatic over her baby boy making a new friend, and a girl at that. But also showed her concerns when he had started talking about the practical exam. His father on the other hand looked at him with pride, chuckling when Izuku said he had thrown his wolves across the city to gather points by themselves after Present Mike gave the okay. Izuku nodded with a groan. Yeah. I still have no idea how I even managed to hold it for that long to charge it for that Dragon Mirage attack. It only blew up when I noticed it was on my hands instead of Lupus. Sent me flying quite far even. He grimaced slightly. If Tokoyami hadn't caught me, I think I would have gotten pretty hurt. Wait, you were holding it when it blew up? Inko frowned worriedly, taking Izuku's right hand with her own to search for injuries. No, I saw it breaking and released it before it could explode, but it did as soon as it left my hand. Nothing that recovery girl couldn't heal, don't worry. He assured her. Yeah, that woman works miracles. Isashi chimed in. I remember when I studied there, she helped me with so many of my burns. He chuckled sheepishly. While the man's skin was fire-resistant, he could still be burned by specially hot flames or localized explosions. The latter of which was the common result of the many special moves the man had tried to create in his youth. It's a good thing he could heal burns quite well, or else his body would be a giant burn scar by this point. Regardless, I would recommend dropping all training you were planning to do in order to focus on trying to figure out how to control this blade as soon as possible. He pointed out. It sounds like Draco is quite the powerful sword. It would be stupid to push it aside just because it's giving you trouble at the moment. His son nodded in agreement. I know. I have an idea of what it could be, but I still need to make sure about it first. He stood up and started to walk towards his bedroom. I think it would be better if I searched for a good place for me to train. I don't think our backyard would be a good idea anymore, and people are using Dagobah again after I helped clean it. Tell me if you don't find anything. His father said with a hum. I know I got a lot more responsibilities after I went up in the ranks, but I'd gladly take a day off to help you with it. Same here. Inko smiled. I know I don't have the same expertise as the two of you, but sometimes an outsider's perspective can help you figure things out. Izuku turned to smile at them. I'll keep it in mind. Excuse me. His parents watched him walk away. Inko hummed. The dragon? I would have expected something fire-related, but I guess overwhelming strength could also work. Sounds more like a Taurus thing to me, but sure. Hisashi chuckled alongside her. Dropping his bag on his bed, he stretched and emptied his pockets on his study table at the same time that he turned his computer on, Luna appearing by his side and walking to the corner of the room with a yawn, laying down on an old blanket Izuku had put in there for her. He sat down, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion for a moment while waiting for it to finish booting up, then opening his browser. On the corner of his eye, he noticed his cell phone and remembered that he still had to text Tokoyami. Scrolling through his contacts for a moment, he found the girl's number and quickly sent her a message. Tokoyami Miyako private messaging. Midoriya Izuku. Hey Tokoyami, it's Midoriya. You asked me to send you a message later today. He turned back to his computer and searched for a nearby place to train without breaking any quirk laws, or far enough from people that they wouldn't see him breaking any quirk laws. A few minutes into his search his phone vibrated, showing that the girl had responded. Tokoyami Miyako. Hello, Midoriya. I'm surprised you texted me so soon. Midoriya Izuku? Yeah, I took my phone out of my pocket and remembered it. Midoriya Izuku? How were things after we went our ways? My parents got a bit crazy when I got home, but that was mostly because of Draco. Tokoyami Miyako. Everything went well. I don't live that far from UA, as you might imagine. My parents were happy with how I handled the exam, but were understandably worried when I informed them of the zero-pointer. Tokoyami Miyako. My mother says thank you. Midoriya Izuku. It was nothing really. Tokoyami Miyako. Morgan asks to create a group chat between the three of us so that she may talk to you directly, is that okay? Midoriya Izuku. Morgan has a phone? Tokoyami Miyako. She uses the computer while I stay on my phone. Midoriya Izuku. Ah, that makes more sense. Sure thing, I'd love to talk to her. He only waited for a second before he received a message from a new notification telling him that he was added to a group. God is our DM. Warlock Kenku, and here he is. Eldritch Blast. Nice. Hey Midoriya, how are things? Oh wow. He snickered. Midoriya Izuku. Holy crap, these names are perfect ha. Eldritch Blast. Thank you, they were my idea. Eldritch Blast. Also, no real names allowed. Midoriya Izuku. Hang on. Midoriya Izuku has changed his name to Hexblade Warlock. Hexblade Warlock, same class. Warlock Kenku, same class. Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast. Oh wow, you got her to meme. Eldritch Blast. Old as that meme is, that's impressive. I'll love having you here with us. Warlock Kenku. Shush, demon spawn. Eldritch Blast. I will never be silenced. Warlock Kenku. Bet? Eldritch Blast. Betag Gem. Warlock Kenku. I win. Hexblade Warlock. Let the shade speak, woman. Warlock Kenku. No. Hexblade Warlock. R.I.P. Morrigan, she'll be missed. Warlock Kenku. Depends on who you ask. Eldritch Blast. I see how it is. Izuku chuckled, shaking his head. He turned back to his computer, noticing a place that seemed a bit promising. He hummed, an idea coming to mind. Hexblade Warlock. Hey, are you still interested in learning presence suppression? I was planning on training with Draco tomorrow. You can come with me and I'll teach you the basics. Warlock Kenku. I am, and I'd appreciate that if it won't disturb your own training. When and where? Hexblade Warlock. 2 p.m., and I was thinking Yase Park? It looks like a good place. Warlock Kenku. I know where it is. Quirk usage is allowed so long as it doesn't directly harm another person and is decently big. I'll see you there? Hextech Warlock. It's a date. Izuku smirked, seeing the text that showed that Tokoyami was typing a message appear and disappear multiple times, finally disappearing a last time without any message being sent. Eldritch Blast. Huh. She just set her phone down and walked away. Eldritch Blast. See you tomorrow, she's getting close to our distance limiasic necks. The greenette sweat dropped. That didn't even count as flirting. How easy is she to fluster? He turned to his familiar, seeing her out cold on her little bed. He observed her for a moment, a wave of tiredness washing over him once again. You know what, girl, you might have had the right idea. He muttered, saving the park's website for later and laying down on his bed for a quick nap. The next day came soon enough and Izuku found himself walking towards Yase Park after getting off his train a block or so away. It was still a bit earlier than 2, but he liked to arrive in places a bit earlier than necessary most of the time, and as such he predictably couldn't find his friend anywhere close to the gates once he arrived. He entered the park and walked to a bench near the entrance with a good view of it, manipulating his dust to create a shade over him to protect himself from the afternoon sun. Luna manifested by his side and put her gigantic head on his lap, and he petted her absent-mindedly while waiting. He didn't need to wait for long, as 5 minutes later a familiar hoodie-wearing figure walked through the gates, looking around. She stopped once Izuku waved her over, nodding at him before approaching. Hey! She greeted once she was close enough. Hey! Izuku smiled. Don't you think it's a bit too hot to be wearing a hoodie? Tokoyami shrugged, pulling the hood back. When you have a creature as cool to the touch as Morrigan living inside of you, temperature stops being a bother for the most part. What about you? You're wearing a scarf. He smirked. When you can summon a substance as cool to the touch as moon dust, temperature stops being a bother for the most part. Fair. I resent that, by the way. Morrigan grumbled as she revealed herself. She turned to the boy with an ice smile. Hey Midoriya. How are things? He nodded at the shade. Pretty good, but I'm already a bit anxious over the test results. You and me both. Tokoyami snorted, shaking her head. So, did you have anything planned for our training outside of the basics? Izuku shrugged, gently pushing Luna's head off his lap so he could stand up. Not much, just the basics for now. I looked over the map they had on the site and I think I have a good location where we can train. We can discuss details there. With her nod, he led the way through one of the tracks, The group walking in comfortable silence apart from Luna and Morrigan darting around the path and the greenery around it, looking at anything shiny that caught their attention and scaring the local wildlife. After a few minutes of walking, Izuku stepped off the path, leading them through the trees until they found a small clearing of sorts near one of the small lakes of the park. And you found the place just by looking at the map? Away from them. How about it? The wolfess barked in agreement, jumping to her paws and running away from the group. She turned once she reached the edge of the clearing and started running towards the girl. Better look out, she already started. He advised. Tokoyami's eyes widened and she jumped out of the way of the familiar's pounce. Luna hit the floor and darted away for a few meters before turning back and pouncing again, but this time Tokoyami was ready for it. The moment the wolf came close, Morrigan was already in front of her to intercept her pounce, blocking it and trying to attack back. Luna was too fast for the shade, however, and kicked off of Morrigan's block to escape her counter. Izuku observed the three of them go at it for a while, Luna alternating between high pounces and low dashes so that Tokoyami and Morrigan would have to improvise on their defense whenever the wolf abruptly changed tactics mid-charge. He frowned slightly, observing how Tokoyami was only moving her body out of the way while Morrigan essentially did all the work for the both of them. She seriously needs a technique to cover short range. If someone manages to feint Morrigan, they're both screwed. He mused. He raised an eyebrow when the shade glanced back at her partner and retreated into her body, leaving Tokoyami standing defenseless in front of Luna. The wolfess noticed the change as well, tilting her head slightly but still charged at the girl to let her try whatever she was planning, jumping as soon as the girl entered pounce distance. Tokoyami watched her come, pulling an arm back in preparation, and as soon as Luna was close enough, she struck. Now! Her hand snapped forward, shadows enveloping her arm along the way and a dark claw shooting out to impact Luna in her chest, not only completely stopping the surprised wolf's momentum but also pushing her back for a few meters. After the initial blow, Morrigan pulled her arm back, the afternoon sun making her a bit too weak to extend a single limb that far. Luna hit the floor on her back, quickly rolling back to her paws to reposition and prepare for another charge, but stopped once she saw Tokoyami lift a hand. I think I got it, she said. It would be best if we changed our training method if we do train that move in specific. A fast blow to catch enemies off guard and hit them before they can dodge, huh? Izuku mused, a hand on his chin. Not bad. I was thinking something a bit more close range to cover all your bases, but I guess that's a good one too. He smirked. Maybe I should teach you how to use a sword too? Tokoyami chuckled. I certainly wouldn't mind, but I already have me hands full with presence suppression. Also, I doubt it would go along with my quirk all that well. A bit of creativity would take care of that. So, what are we gonna call it? Morrigan piped up excitedly, quite literally vibrating in the air besides the girl. Tokoyami hesitated for a moment. I think we should train it a bit more before we dash. Screw that name now. Alright, I'll try to come up with something good. She rolled her eyes. She sat down beside Izuku, eyes narrowed in concentration. After a few moments of nothing, Izuku smirked slightly. Not that easy, huh? Tokoyami sighed, shaking her head. It really isn't. She muttered. How did you even come up with all of yours? It's easy when you make a pattern for it. He shrugged. Luni Lupus has that name for a reason. All the attacks I use with my Moondust are mostly night-related and wolf-related whenever I use my summons, but sometimes I also have a few space-related names sprinkled in since my quirk is actually constellation-based apparently. Tokoyami nodded in understanding. If I'd follow that, I would be using darkness and bird-related attacks, then. Maybe a bit of night as well, if I do end up with the hero name I was thinking about, she hummed, looking down at her hands. How about Dance of the Raven Claw? Izuku nodded. Yeah, that's a good one. Normally, I tend to avoid names with more than 3 words to keep them simple and easy to say in the middle of battle, but I like it. And I love it. Morrigan laughed, punching the air twice quickly. Dance of the Raven Claw. Bam bam. Both Izuku and Tokoyami chuckled at her antics. The raven tilted her head slightly, remembering something. Speaking of names, you called your moon sword Luni Lupus, but you only really called your dragon sword the name if it's constellation. Morrigan blinked, stopping with her literal shadow fighting for a moment. Actually, you haven't come up with a name for it yet? Izuku stopped, looking downwards. No, I haven't. Naming an attack is easy. If you stop liking the name you can just change it, but I can't do that with my sword. He sighed. Lupus is sentient, so I would assume Draco is as well. I need to give my sword a name that fits. That feels right. Tokoyami slowly nodded. I think I know what you mean. Morrigan went by Dark Shadow for quite a while until I finally came up with a good name for her. Izuku nodded as well, pulling his cell phone to see if one of his parents had sent him a message while he was training. They hadn't, but a glance at the digital clock gave him another thing to worry about. It's getting a bit late. He pointed out. Let's give 1 or 2 more tries before returning? Tokoyami nodded in agreement, and they both returned to their initial techniques before they headed back to their respective homes. God is our DM, and he wants a TPK. Warlock Kenku, I got it. Warlock Kenku, I was sitting on the sofa while training and my mom passed by, barely glancing over my spot. Warlock Kenku, well, she squinted a bit so it wasn't perfect but still, she always locks eyes with me for a moment when we look at each other, and this time she didn't. Warlock Kenku, I got it. Hexblade Warlock. Nice. I knew you could do it. Hexblade Warlock. And much faster than when I learned too. It's been what, a week? Warlock Kenku, sounds about right. Hexblade Warlock. Yeah, it took me a few weeks to even get the smallest of results. Warlock Kenku, really? Warlock Kenku, any ideas on why? Hexblade Warlock. People connected to darkness, trickery and misdirection can learn it faster than others. Hexblade Warlock. Something, natural affinity. Hexblade Warlock. I actually already knew that you'd be able to learn it faster than me, I just underestimated how fast it would be. Hexblade Warlock. Also, your personality may have helped you a lot as well. I was quite hyper when I was a kid, and with a muttering habit on top of that, so I couldn't hide my sounds to save my life. Warlock Kenku, I see. Hexblade Warlock. Hey, where's Morrigan? She would have spoken up by now. Warlock Kenku, she's sulking over the fact that she can't be manifested for it to work. Warlock Kenku, for now at least. Hexblade Warlock. Heh, you'll get there eventually. The more you train with it, the more things you'll get away with when cloaked, such as actually moving with it. Hell, I can even talk without revealing myself if I do so low enough. Izuku, said teenager almost dropped his phone in surprise when his mother barged in, looking frantic as she held up an envelope with a fancy-looking wax seal. It's here. She stammered. Izuku's eyes widened when he put 2 and 2 together. He quickly jumped off of his bed. Let's go to the living room so we can see it together. He was about to join his mother, but paused. Turning back to his phone, he quickly typed a message before leaving. Hexblade Warlock. Hang on, my letter from UA arrived. I'll be back in a bit. Warlock Kenku, really? Warlock Kenku, alright, I'll go see if mine arrived as well. Stepping out his bedroom and walking towards the living room, he found his mother already seated on the sofa, waiting patiently for him with his letter in hand. His father wasn't home at the moment, so unfortunately he wouldn't be there to watch his son's reaction to being accepted. Izuku smiled at her and sat by her side, taking the envelope and holding it in front of him for a moment. He took a deep breath to calm himself before opening it. The envelope contained a slip of paper and a metallic disc with a lens on one side with a small button right beside it. He raised an eyebrow before putting the disc down on top of the small coffee table, lens up, and pressed the button. Both he and his mother jumped when a light shone from the lens, forming a hologram of a quite famous hero in the air right over the disc. I am here as a projection. All Might's voice boomed through the device, making his mother gasp in surprise. All Might. She muttered. What is he doing in a letter from UA? Sorry for the lack of communication, we've been busy for the entirety of the week. The hologram hero laughed sheepishly. The truth is, the reason why I came back to this town is that I am now a teacher at UA. That's surprising, I didn't think the number 1 would have enough time in his schedule to teach. Hearing his mother's words, Izuku couldn't help but let out a nervous chuckle. Yeah, right? Anyways, the voice of the hero regained their attention. You received an amazing score in the written exam, a nice 92%. As for the practical exam, well, behind the hero a panel appeared, showing the boy's full name beside the number 37 under the category of villain points. This is the amount of points you've managed to gather by yourself. Normally it wouldn't be enough to be accepted, as the cut is 40 points, but as you may expect this isn't all. He grinned. With your ingenious strategy of sending your wolves forth to gather points by themselves, your score skyrocketed. Observe. The silhouette of a wolf's head appeared over his score for a moment before breaking, revealing a new number that counted both his score and his wolves. Your pack managed to gather 148 points by themselves, giving you an amazing score of 185 points, putting you not only as the top scorer of this year's exam, but also in the top 20 scores in the history of UA. Izuku stared in shock at the triple digits number displayed in the screen alongside his name, and the fact that he was a record holder. He felt his mother embrace him, ecstatic. Oh, my little Izuku will be a hero. He laughed and returned the hug, tears brimming his eyes. Did you think that was all? Both Midoriyas froze, turning to look back at the hologram in disbelief as All Might kept talking. Oh no, no. After all, a hero school that only tests its candidates in the strength of their quirks shouldn't be considered a hero school at all. Behold, the hero points. Another category appeared besides this combat score in the same moment that the hero announced it. They are awarded to those that displayed a heroic heart during the practical exams, either by helping fellow examinees or outright saving them, which you did in the most spectacular fashion. A clip of his rescue of Tokoyami appeared, making his mom gasp once again upon seeing her son jump towards the behemoth and fire off an illusory dragon through it. This is just the most grandiose of your actions. Through the entire exam you helped multiple examinees either by taking them out of harm's way or by destroying the robots about to attack them, clearly with the intent of preventing harm. With all of these actions combined, you have received an astounding score of 80 rescue points. The number appeared in its category before the shocked teen's eyes, bringing you to an amazing score of 265 points. He couldn't help but announce in his bellowing voice. Now this puts you in the top 5 scores of all time, a feat only achieved by heroes that would go and become part of the top 10 heroes in Japan. He chuckled. In fact, you scored 4th place just over Ryukyu's score, knocking her down a spot and Gang Orca off the list entirely. I guess what I'm saying is... He extended a hand towards the camera, as well as towards the odd boy. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram disappeared, leaving 2 stunned greenettes staring at nothing for a few seconds. Mother and son turned to each other, locked eyes and then pulled each other in a tight hug, crying freely in both pride and relief. You scored top 5 of all time? Tokoyami screeched at him over the phone, her shock all but shattering her usual calm demeanor. Tietz. Izuku winced, rubbing a finger inside his ear. First of all, you could have just said that through the chat. You didn't need to call me just so you could blow my eardrums off. Second, I know, right? He laughed in disbelief. Mom and I were crying for so long after the message ended, I was genuinely afraid we had soaked the document that came with the hologram. He ran a hand through his hair, a massive grin in his face. Can you believe it? All Might said that I would reach top 10. Well, not directly, but still. That's genuinely amazing, Midoriya. It seemed the girl had calmed down, but he could still hear her grin. And here I was, proud that I got 3rd place. Oh well, she sighed. Hey, that's an amazing feat as well. He immediately protested. Just managing to enroll UA with that much competition is already impressive. Reaching the top 10 in the exam is something to be extremely proud of. Izuku paused, hearing her chuckle. Wait, you're just messing with me, aren't you? He Learnsis, Morrigan hissed humorously. Stop with your antics, you foul demon. Tokoyami berated, still chuckling. Anyways, I'm happy you're in as well. Which class were you assigned to? I am in 1A. His eyebrows shot up. Huh, so am I. He couldn't help but grin. Looks like fate wants us together, he said happily. A series of sputters and the laughter of a certain shade came through the device, making him laugh as well while shaking his head. No, seriously, you're way too easy to fluster. Comes with having barely any social interaction aside from the necessary for most of my life. She grumbled under her breath. Goodbye, Izuku. Side boy blinked. Hey wait, you can't just say that and she already hung up. He sighed. Gonna have to talk to her about that someday. He threw his phone on his bed and sat down beside it, huffing. Luna materialized by his side, tail wagging happily as she shoved her head on his lap, begging for pats. Izuku laughed, running his hand through her fur and feeling its wispy texture as he hummed. His eyes trailed back to his device, and he remembered the last 2 conversations with his friend. She's already come so far in such a short amount of time. He hummed. And she hasn't even scratched the surface of her potential. A living shadow quirk is extremely useful, both in itself and because of all the extra bonuses that it granted her, and Izuku knew for a fact that she hadn't even thought about a third of the abilities she gained from it. Shadow cloaking, enhancements, even flight. The girl seriously underestimated how versatile her quirk was, and he bet she wasn't doing it on purpose. And she already had control for most of it too when in daylight, she just needed to think outside of the box a bit. Meanwhile, he frowned, lifting his hand from Luna and manifesting his Draco sword, the blade flickering into existence. He held it gently, the construct wavering wildly but not exploding due to excess power. I can't even summon you with enough power to not break just by touching anything, really. He sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. Well, better than not being able to summon you at all, right? He opened his eyes and glanced over the blade. But still, even though I can summon your blade, why can't I feel your stars? He muttered softly. He sighed once again, flopping down on his bed while Luna looked up at him in concern. I have already accepted you, Draco. Have you not done the same for me? Are you sure you have everything you need? Inko worried over her son. Tissues? A handkerchief. Her son shook his head with an amused smile in his face under his scarf, a hand gripping the doorknob as he prepared to leave. Iduma. No need to worry about me. She smiled slightly. I'm your mother, Izuku. Worrying about you is my job. She looked him up and down, letting out a small sitch. You look really cool. I'm sure your father would agree if he saw you now. Izuku's eyes widened for a moment, and he chuckled. Thanks, Mom. And don't worry about Dad either, I know he had an important job today. The man had been really sorry that he had to leave for his job, but apparently a raid had been scheduled on this day and as the strongest hero of the group, he had to be present. It's alright. Either way, I think it would be better if I got going. Inko nodded, pulling him into a quick hug before waving him off. Izuku nodded and stepped out of his house, walking towards the train station and UA. It took him about half an hour to reach the school via train, and during all the way he couldn't help but smile once again over the fact that he managed to enroll at UA. It had been a month and a half ever since he had received his acceptance letter, and it honestly still felt like he was dreaming. Then again, studying at UA has been a dream of his for a long time, so in a way he was. His smile dimmed slightly, remembering that even with the large amount of time he had to train, he had barely been able to wield Draco. No matter what he did, he could either summon the blade at low power to the point where it would break basically every time it touched something harder than a tap, or with so much power that it would break after just a moment. He could still use it, but having to reform the blade after every strike was a headache and a half. He sighed. No time to think about that now, he had to find his class before it started. Looking around, he remembered that Hound Dog had told him that his class was in this particular part of the school and that it would be very obvious once he got close enough. Oh, so that's what he meant. He sweat dropped, staring at the giant door with one written in the front in large red letters. Well, time to meet my classmates. I was very lucky to have Tokoyami be my classmate. Maybe my luck is big enough that I ended up in a class different from Bakugo's. He opened the door. Get your feet off the desk right this instant. Yeah, I didn't think so either. He sighed, already pulling his scarf over his nose and hiding his presence to sneak past the two teens yelling at each other. He noticed a few of his classmates look towards the door in confusion, seeing it open but without any sign of who opened it. One of them had noticed, of course, her rose eyes effortlessly following his movements despite the fact that he had put quite a bit of concentration in the technique. He smirked. Much like he had predicted, the girl had taken to the technique like a fish to water, being able to hide herself from any untrained eyes that glance over her. It still wasn't as good as Izuku with his years of experience, but he knew it was only a matter of time. Walking towards his table, near Tokoyami but right behind Bakugo, he was starting to get annoyed with his luck. He gave his friend a nod, which she returned stiffly. Izuku frowned for a moment, sitting down on his chair and turning to the raven. "You all right?" he asked in a low tone, being as loud as he could without letting his presence be known. Tokoyami crossed her arms over his table and put her head over them, hiding her beak just enough to help her hide her presence, at least to a level where she could hide her voice slightly. "Please strike me down," she muttered morosely, eye twitching. Izuku frowned again, watching over his friend in concern to try and guess what was wrong with her. In the 2 months he had known the girl, the first thing that he had noticed was her calm attitude towards pretty much anything, as well as her need to dramatize anything that was so much as an inconvenience. He glanced down and snorted. "It's just a skirt, woman up." Her eye twitched again. Skirts are useless pieces of fabric that only serve to get the eyes of anyone walking by, especially when they are this short. It reaches midway down your tights. Too short. Honestly, I think it looks good on you. Don't care, either give me pants or end me. Izuku blinked in surprise before huffing a laugh, shaking his head. Doesn't help that you can't use your hoodie either, huh? And yet you can wear a scarf longer than you are tall. The unfairness of this world we live in. Tokoyami let out a low growl that sounded strangely close to a bird's hunting cry. This time Izuku laughed loud enough to break him out of his suppression, startling some of the other students around them when he just appeared out of the ether in their perspective. "Can't do anything about that one, but you can ask the teacher about the pants later. Freaking drama queen, I swear. If you're here to make friends, then get out." Someone spoke from the door, startling students from their conversations, especially the brunette that had just arrived and the tall blue-haired boy that had gone to welcome her. "You are students of the UA Hero course, act like it." Izuku heard the sound of a zipper and the rustling of fabric. A few seconds later, a black-haired man walking inside with a yellow sleeping bag in his arms while the students hurried to their seats. "It took you 8 seconds to shut up and sit down. Time is precious. It's sad that most people don't seem to understand such a basic concept." He huffed, eyeing his students. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda. Nice to meet you." His eyes moved to meet Izuku's, who seemed to mirror the look he had, a fact only strengthened by the large scarf that he had been wearing in a way very similar to how the man wore his own. Izuku met his gaze and lifted his head slightly to show a small amused smile as his eyes narrowed in interest, and the man knew he himself had a similar look of concealed curiosity in his face. Looking away from the boy, he reached inside his sleeping bag and pulled a gym uniform, showing it to the class. "You have uniforms similar to this one under your chairs. Put them on and meet me in the field. You have 10 minutes. With that he turned and left. The class stared at him as he exited, before they snapped out of it and scrambled to their feet to follow him. None noticed that Izuku and Tokoyami were long gone. Izuku snickered, watching Tokoyami grasp at her current attire with a calm look in her eyes, but an unmistakable gleam of relief in her eyes. She noticed his gaze and huffed, averting her eyes, not caring that it only made him laugh louder. "A Quirk assessment test?" the brunette from earlier asked in surprise, gaining their attention. "But what about the entrance ceremony? The orientation?" "Useless," he said simply. He turned his tired gaze towards the group as a whole. "One of UA's selling points is how unrestricted our school traditions are, be to our students or to us teachers." He crossed his arms. "You kids have been doing these exercises since junior high, have you not? Physical tests in which you weren't allowed to use your quirks." He shook his head. "The government still uses average scores from students not using their quirks. which in my opinion is completely irrational. His gaze fixed on a student in specific. Bakugo, you had the highest unassisted villain score in the exams. What was your best result for the softball throw? About 72 meters. He answered easily. Izuku held back a snort because of course Bakugo had his results in the tip of his tongue. The teacher threw the ball he was holding to the blonde, which he caught with ease. Try again, but use your quirk. So long as you don't leave the circle, anything goes. The student nodded and walked towards said mark. What does he mean with unassisted? A green-haired girl asked, her appearance similar to a frog's. I thought we couldn't help others in the exam? I did find it weird that the villain score was that high. Do you think whoever that was cheated? A girl with short purple hair and earphone jacks for earlobes asked with a raised eyebrow. I didn't cheat, my quirk has a summoning aspect to it. Izuku scoffed, gaining surprised looks from the rest of the class. I just threw them all over the testing area and told them to go crazy, and their scores were added to mine. He shrugged. Oh yeah, I saw you in the exam. A black-haired teen with a toothy grin and large elbows snapped his fingers. You rode a wolf at the start, but then told it to go running in a different direction you were going. Izuku nodded in confirmation. On my own, I only got 37 points, but I didn't go that seriously since I already knew I'd pass with both mine and my summon scores. I guess I could have gathered over 50 if I really tried. Bakugo on the other hand, he pointed to the blonde, who was already rearing back his hand that grasped the ball. Die! He roared, throwing the ball with as much strength as well as the strongest explosion he could muster, sending it flying through the air and out of sight in an instant. He got 72 villain points by himself, with no rescue points whatsoever. Izuku sighed. As you can see, he is as abrasive as his quirk. The cell phone in Aizawa's hand let out a ding, and he raised an eyebrow. Know your limits first. He nodded, turning his phone towards the rest of the class. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a good hero. 702.1 meters? Half of the class shouted in surprise, making Bakugo smirk in pride and arrogance as he walked back to join the other students. So we can use our quirks however we want, huh? Another black-haired boy muttered, this time one with a very large build and just as large lips. This is going to be so fun. A pink-skinned girl threw her arms up in excitement. Fun, you say? Aizawa shut her up with a glare. You have 3 years to become top-tier heroes. Will you act like this the entire time? He asked, waiting for her response. When none came, he smirked. Alright, new rule. Whoever places last will be deemed without potential and be expelled on the spot. Most of the class gasped in shock, making his smirk widen a tad. Like I said, we're free to handle our students whoever we want. Welcome to UA's hero course. Isn't that a bit unfair? The brunette from earlier stammered. Natural disasters, big accidents, and rampaging villains. Calamities whose time or place can't be predicted. Their teacher explained. The world is an unfair place. It's our jobs as heroes to make it a little bit fairer. UA will break you apart and rebuild you into heroes who are more than capable of doing so. Go beyond, plus ultra. Aizawa watched the students' expressions change from nervousness to determination before turning and walking away from them. Alright, talk's over. We don't have all day. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Izuku observed his peers in curiosity, learning their names as well as making mental notes on their quirks so that he could put them down in one of his analysis notebooks. The pink girl Ashido was very creative with hers, using her acid in a gel-like consistency to reduce friction to near zero, and Siro using his tape to tether him to the finish line, something that Tokoyami herself mirrored with Morrigan's arms since they were both doing the test together. The winner of the test, as expected, was the youngest son of the Ida family, who used his own engine quirk to greatly enhance his speed. Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku. Aizawa called, snapping him out of his thoughts. He walked forward, ignoring the glare the blonde sent his way as he simply stood in the place his teacher had pointed him towards, lowering himself like he was preparing for a jump instead of a run. Aizawa raised an eyebrow but shrugged, starting the dash by firing the starting gun. A simple pistol that fired off bursts of air with a loud popping sound. Bakugo launched himself forward with his blast rush turbo technique, taking to the air with repeated explosions by riding their recoils. Izuku, on the other hand, jumped forward almost as high as he was tall, not really intending to run. Guardian Luna. The Sar Wolfess appeared under him in a spiral of moondust, her summoner falling on her back just as she took off running in a flash, passing Bakugo almost immediately as she tore her way to the finish. 3:84 seconds. The machine beeped once they passed it, activating once again right after. 4:13 seconds. Not bad, girl. Thank you for your help. Izuku smiled, running his hand through Luna's fur much to her enjoyment. Besides them, Bakugo growled in rage, but was stopped from approaching by Luna's own louder and deeper growl. Sorry, Bakugo, looks like she still doesn't like you all that much. Izuku smiled. Can't say I blame her, really. The explosive boy looked at him in rage, but turned on his heel and walked away with a huff once he noticed the teacher's gaze on them. Luna let out a puff of air and walked back to the other classmates with Izuku still on her back, smirking to herself over the teen's odd stares. It looks so awesome. The invisible girl, Hagakure, gushed, jumping closer to the Wolfess without any fear in her eyes. The greenette jumped off his summon's back with an amused smile, putting a hand on his wolf's side. Her name is Luna, she's one of my most powerful summons. Luna barked happily, enjoying the attention she was receiving. She's pretty powerful, but sometimes if she's an actual wolf instead of a lapdog. He didn't even flinch as the Wolfess turned and bit his head, growling at the insult. Just a puppy. Luna growled louder, making the others sweat drop. Test 2, Grip Strength. Most students didn't have a quirk that directly affected their strength, so they had to either use their quirkless strength or think of an alternative way to use their quirks for it. Izuku was more than confident in his grip strength, but after seeing Yaoyorozu somehow create an industrial press of sorts for hers and Aizawa not saying anything about it, he decided on a different approach. Hey girl, catch. He threw the dynamometer used for the test towards Luna, who caught it in her jaws effortlessly, already using her tongue to move it in position for what Izuku was planning. Ready? Wild Fang. The Wolfess fangs glowed as she redirected energy towards it and bit down hard on the device. A few seconds later and it beeped, showing the results. Izuku whistled. Wow, 317, 3 kilograms, that's really good. Luna let the device fall on his hand, tail wagging. He turned to see who else managed to go over 100 kilos, noticing Shoji's amazing score over 500s and Sato's own being very close to his and Luna's. He smiled when he saw Tokoyami in that group as well, using both her strength and Morrigan's to reach around 120 kilos, and blinked in surprise when he saw a large student in the back by himself. He thought his name was, looking down with a small smile at his own device. Why is he standing so far away from other people? He looked pretty nervous in the last test too, Izuku thought, noticing that the boy held the device in a way that no one else could see it. Maybe he's just shy? Noticing that the tests were going to take a while, he dismissed Luna and walked over to the boy, sneaking unseen past other people as well as the boy. Peeking from behind him, he saw that Kuda had a quite impressive score as well, clocking at 142 kilograms. Not bad. Kuda jumped in surprise, whirling around to look at the greenette, who lifted a hand sheepishly. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. Still, I mean it, not bad at all. Are you a strength enhancer? The larger boy lifted his hands and hesitated for a moment before shaking his head, a small frown on his face. Izuku glanced at Kuda's hands for a second before it clicked. Lifting his hands as well, he quickly moved them in a series of gestures. Really? That's surprising, few people our age can reach that high without super strength. Kuda gasped, hands flying. You know JSL? Yeah, my dad said it was something heroes have to learn during the course, so I decided to learn it earlier. Izuku nodded. Mute? The other boy nodded. Selectively. I don't feel comfortable talking much. He smiled. I'm Kuda Kuji, it's nice to meet you. I didn't think I'd meet someone else who knew sign language until we needed to learn for the course. Midoriya Izuku, and yeah, same here. Besides my dad, I don't know many people who do know sign language. I wanted more people to train mine a bit more. Izuku shrugged. You're really good at it. Thanks. Izuku chuckled. So, your strength is a mutation from one of your parents? My friend over there is like that too. She has a bit of enhanced senses because of it. He tilted his head towards Tokoyami. Kuda nodded, his eyes glancing between Tokoyami and Morrigan. What's your quirk then? Right. It's an e-voice. I can talk to animals and they feel compelled to follow my orders. Kuda explained. I heard your wolf earlier, she really likes you. Izuku blinked. That's pretty cool. I wonder if you can control her? Kuda paused to think. Well, some animals can refuse my commands if they have enough willpower to do it, and since she seemed completely sentient, she is. It's very likely that she'll just ignore me. He frowned a bit. Maybe if you summoned her without giving an order and I didn't tell her to do anything that would cause you harm? Something to test later. Izuku nodded. Alright, I already have the results for all of you, we can move on to the next test. Aizawa called for the students. The two boys turned to each other before following the rest of their class. Test 3, Standing Long Jump. If not many people had quirks for the last test, this time it was the opposite. Over half of the class either jumped over 2/3 of the sandbox or cleared it entirely, examples being Uraraka floating over it, Azui clearing it with a jump, Bakugo flying the entire way, Todoroki jumping with the aid of a pillar of ice. Even Kirishima and Kuda used their strength, quirk-related or otherwise, to jump over half of the box. Tokoyami cleared it as well, jumping and pushing off the floor with one of Morrigan's arms and then pulling her all the way to the other side of the box with the other, imitating Zero once again after seeing the boy go just before her. He had looked at her with a grin and sent her a thumbs up while she was walking back, the raven nodding back. Izuku stepped over to his spot, thinking on how to do this. He figured riding Luna once again wouldn't count as he needed to be completely away from the ground for it, and Luna touching it would probably count, so he needed something else. He smirked as an idea came to him, summoning Luni Lupus and using it to create 3 fake blades. Putting them together side by side, he jumped on top of it and used his telekinetic grasp over them to hover over the sandbox, wobbling slightly as it was the first time he ever tried something like that, but still managing to keep his balance until he could jump off at the other side of the pit. Gonna have to train that one, even if just a static version. He muttered. Being able to create footholds whenever I go is a great skill to have. Agreed, and that gives you at least one good use for your fakes. Tokoyami hummed. You tend to ignore them in favor of your sword arts. Izuku nodded in agreement. I thought your quirk was the wolf? Kuda questioned. I can manifest constellations as swords or animals. He shrugged. Kuda made an motion without making the sound. That was the wolf constellation? Yeah. Tokoyami looked between them. JSL? Yep. Yes, the two boys answered together, Izuku continuing. I can teach you if you want, and maybe Kuda might want to help? Kuda nodded, happy about having a chance to make new friends. The raven smiled. I'd like that. Test 4, Repeated Sidesteps. Nothing to say about this one. Really, most of the scores were completely normal, the only exception being the small teen with purple ball for hair, who made 2 piles of said ball and rapidly bounced between them, easily gaining the highest score for that test. It was ingenious, really. Shame the boy seemed to be an extreme pervert. Test 5, Ball Throw. Now this is the test that he was waiting for, the one where the students' quirks would be shown at their maximum. Despite that, however, most people didn't have the ability to launch the ball that far. Even the strongest teens only sent it flying 200 meters at a maximum, but no one could get close to Bakugo's score. And then Uraraka sent it out of orbit. Literally. Huh. Izuku blinked, the rest of the class gaping at the blushing girl. Gravity negation. Would you look at that? That's insane. Jiraiya gasped. Aizawa sent the students an impatient glare, snapping them out of their shock and moving things along, Ojiro taking her place. Izuku was happy to have things moving, taking a better note of each of his classmates' quirks. Even Kuda managed to call a bird to take the ball flying for a few hundred meters. Midoriya. Aizawa called, and he stepped up to the circle, taking the ball from the hero's hand. He thought for a moment, not sure on which one of his moves was the best one for the test, But one thing he knew for sure was that he would need to charge whatever it was so he could take it to its highest level, so he summoned Lumen for a moment and spun it while he planned his next move. After running through the list on his head, he nodded, stopping his blade's spin and dust generation to pierce the ball and swing it far, before creating a fake sword and spinning both of them together, getting ready for what was his most powerful move without getting Lupus involved. Midnight Ho Dash. Before he could launch his attack, both of his blades exploded in his hands and the wave expanded, sending him flying off the circle and the other students and surprised professor off their feet, though both Izuku, Aizawa, Tokoyami, Todoroki, Bakugo, Azui, Siro and Ashido managed to fall on their feet instead of falling over due to their training, superior agility, or both. Izuku stared in confusion for a second before huffing and glaring at his teacher. You know, Eraserhead, stopping the kid that's maintaining the hyper-compressed wave of moondust from flying off is a very, very dumb idea. Aizawa frowned. I didn't think the reaction would be that explosive. Nothing in your file said the dust wouldn't dispel instantly. I've always dispelled my dust and constructs gradually. I thought you would have noticed it. Izuku huffed. And speaking on constructs, please don't erase my quirk when one of my summons out. They can very much feel pain, and I don't think being forcefully dispelled feels good. His teacher paused for a moment and grimaced. Noted. Though your constructs are the reason why I even stopped you in the first place. He approached the boy. Why haven't you used your second blade? Izuku stopped. Huh. The sword from the entrance. Exams. He clarified. Why haven't you used it? From what I understand, that blade is much stronger than the one you were about to use, at least in the raw power department. This is the best place for you to unleash it, so why not? Izuku stood silent for a moment. I can't control it yet. The only way I can summon it is a weakened form that breaks after a single strike. I guess I could use one of my sword arts with it, but the backlash would be strong enough to hurt me. You had 2 months to get it under control, and yet you haven't? Aizawa glared at him. Are you seriously telling me that you awakened a new blade and didn't take it seriously? Izuku matched his glare. Draco is sentient. It's not something that I can just force to work for me. It needs to both agree with and support my actions, or else it won't work. Ask anyone with a sentient quirk and they'll tell the same thing. Hell. He pointed towards Tokoyami. There's one right here. Ask her. See what she says. And you haven't communicated with it, why? I can't. He growled. I have no idea why, but I can't even feel Draco's stars. Even when I first summoned my sword, before I could summon Lupus Wolves, I could at least feel that. But Draco is hiding from me for whatever reason. Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Until Draco accepts me, there's nothing I can do but try and rein in his energy by myself. And I have no idea what it wants yet. Aizawa stared at him silently, looking for any signs of deception, before huffing and handing him another ball. Do it again. Izuku watched him leave, his classmates talking to each other, trying to figure out what they had talked about and what the greenette was going to do. He looked down at his hands. I can call upon Draco's power, but it doesn't want to help me with control, he muttered. On the other hand, Lupus gives me perfect control but apparently doesn't have enough power without charging their opposites, one needing what the other has mastered. He stared at his fingers, wondering who he was going to use those to, and then his eyes widened. He put the ball on the floor and summoned Lupus back to his grasp, and with a deep breath, he called upon Draco as well. Tokoyami's eyes widened slightly. He's going to use Draco? Oh, this I have to see. Morrigan cackled as she summoned herself. Yaoyorozu turned to her. Draco? Isn't that the dragon constellation? Tokoyami looked at her for a moment and noticed that the rest of the class was also paying attention. Fidgeting slightly from their stares, she nodded. Yes. Izuku's quirk lets him manifest constellations in either sword form or animal form. For the longest time he thought he could only manifest the Lupus constellation, but during the entrance exam the Draco blade awakened. She frowned, crossing her arms. It is a powerful sword, stronger than Lupus by a lot, but he can't control it well yet. I trained with him these past few months, I've seen the progress he made, and the only stable form he can summon the blade in is useless in battle, And if he goes over the limit, it will explode much like earlier, but with less dust and more pure kinetic force. The first time he used it, it exploded him so hard I had to grab him in the air before he cracked his skull on the floor. Morrigan said happily. But if that's the case, shouldn't the teacher stop him? Uraraka asked in worry. If Aizawa-sensei watched our entrance exams, he most likely asked him to use it. Tokoyami frowned. Like I said, Draco is stronger than Lupus. He probably wants to see how strong from up close, and see how well Izuku can control it. Know your limits first, that is the most rational way to form the foundation of a good hero. She echoed the teacher's earlier words. There has to be a better way to do this, no? Ida interjected. Maybe. Maybe not. They watched Izuku put the hilts of the swords together and spun them much like he had done earlier with Lupus and its fake, moondust pouring out of the wolf blade by the ton while the dragon blade grew brighter and brighter as Izuku slowly let go and let the blade's power pile up. Just before the second blade began to crack, however, a change occurred. The blade's glow stopped rising while the other started to glow as well to match it, the dust around Izuku gaining a more bluish hue instead of its usual silvery glow. Izuku's hair and scarf billowed in the wind generated by the vortex of moondust, exuding their own power as they did, and soon the class could feel the concentration of power as well, their clothes moving on their body due to the winds. Izuku opened his eyes, staring at his blade in wonder as they cut through the air, and each releasing its own tune as they did so. I've been treating you two as different entities this whole time. And while that's somewhat true, it's still not the full truth. You two are interconnected. What affects one affects the other, and as such, as one has what the other needs, you can balance each other out. You're not meant to fight alone, you're meant to be working together. Forgive me for not seeing it sooner. He smiled apologetically before narrowing his eyes in determination. But not anymore. I see it now, and there's nothing stopping us from achieving our full potential together. Great? No. That name doesn't properly convey what we're about to do. Lupus may be the lead at the moment, but there are still two individuals in this pair, so hold tight, sync up, and let us dance. In a flash he stopped the spin, raising both blades to the air before bringing them down as one. Lupus Draco Perfect Dance, Grand Alpha. The moment the swords made contact with the floor, the dust trails that followed them exploded, forming a giant hurricane of moondust and sheer power, slowly but surely taking form over the boy. The main body formed slowly, but each of its limbs exploded from it in a second before the head joined them, creating the visage of a legendary wolf who hauled up to the heavens to announce his arrival, his head as tall as the building's second floor. Over the gigantic canine, the image of a dragon flickered into existence for a moment, making eye contact with its fellow patron constellation before diving down at him, exploding into shards of power that searched for their own places in Lupus' body, creating what seemed to be a dragon-scale armor made out of crystal over the wolf. Izuku watched it all unfold with an awed gaze before snapping out of it and grabbing the ball. You guys might want to get ready. This is going to be loud. He laughed as he prepared to throw the ball at the summon, the others scrambling away from the boy and the titan. Hey Lupus, send it as far as you can without destroying it. He grinned ferally and threw the ball, the wolf matching the expression with its own once his target was in his sight. With all you got. Hypernova howl. Time seemed to slow down for a moment as Lupus opened his maw, eyes trailed in the sphere that seemed smaller than a speck of dust to the wolf, and started to charge his attack. The wolf's crystalline armor shimmered along with the wolf's fur, the power of both constellations feeding into the attack as the ball reached the apex of its arc. The ball stopped for a moment, and much like the move's name, the wolf howled. A massive blast of energy erupted from the canine's maw, instantly covering the ball and tearing through the sky as if it was a shooting star that was escaping the planet instead of the contrary. Lupus tried his best to maintain it, but soon enough the blast started to consume the dust that he was made of, and after another second of using the attack he had to stop before he would be completely used for the attack. Izuku and Lupus watched the skies together, panting in exhaustion over the two powerful moves they had to use. Izuku let both of his swords dispel from his hands, walking towards his summon's paw and leaning against it, while the wolf, who was now only barely half the height he had before the attack, armor long gone, only huffed at him, laying down before he either collapsed or dispelled. Izuku let him, straightening himself up and turning a grin towards his teacher. "So, how'd you like that one?" Aizawa watched him and the wolf in shock, before chuckling, shaking his head. This kid. His phone beeped, signaling that the ball had finally hit the floor. He pulled it up, looking at it and chuckling again, turning the device to the class without another word. Kirishima muttered in shock. 4,098 meters. He sent it over 4 kilometers. I was re-eyed. Morrigan sing-songed, eyes spinning dazedly. Tokoyami stared at him for a moment before it clicked. He may not have enough control of Draco, but he wields Lupus so precisely it could honestly be called a dance. He transferred the power of Draco to Lupus, massively enhancing the blade he could already control perfectly, and then summoned the very personification of the constellation of said blade, making so that they both could maintain the power under control together. The girl laughed incredulously, shock overriding the mask of reservation she was trying to maintain to their classmates. Bakugo stared at the whole thing in shock, feeling his world waver around him. When did the nerd get so strong? Even when he managed to coerce the other into a proper battle, he had never shown anything even close to this power. He knew the boy had been training more seriously for UA during the past year, but the jump in power was too great to be only because of the training. He hadn't been taking me seriously. Bakugo thought with a mounting fury. Even when he forced the other boy to fight more fiercely than he had before, he wasn't giving it all he got. Even when he managed to force the body to summon the giant wolf, he had been holding back. Even then, he had been looking down on him. "You!" He roared, literally exploding from his position towards the tired Granette, ready to give him the beatdown of his life and teach him to never, ever dare looking down on him again. The other boy looked at his approach with only annoyance, something that only served to make him even more furious. "I'm going to teach you to respect your betters, you be." Izuku rolled his eyes, waving at Lupus to leave it to him with a hand while he pulled his scarf off of his neck with the other, the fabric starting to glow silver before he struck. In a second, Bakugo was held in place by 2 different straps of fabric, one wider than the other while it glowed, and the other reflecting the first light the same way a metallic object would. "What the hell? These things are hard and my quirk doesn't work," he said, gritted teeth while he struggled with his bindings. Aizawa looked at Izuku with a raised eyebrow, who held a position nearly identical to his with his own scarf. The swordsman shrugged. "My dad said my hair glows when I pile up too much of my quirk, so he asked a friend of his to make a scarf with some of my strands as a test, and it worked. Without focus it's just a normal scarf, but just a bit of my quirk in it makes it much more durable than normal and grants me a semblance of control over it. When he told me that, I decided to copy some of your moves in between training with Draco. You've been one of my favorite heroes for a while," he admitted. Aizawa snorted before glaring at Bakugo. "I don't care what you have against him, this isn't the time or place for fighting. Try that again and you are that one that's going to the chopping block." Bakugo growled for a moment but hesitantly nodded, stopping with his movements. Both teacher and student recalled their scarves, wrapping them around their necks and returning to their positions. Izuku waved in thanks at Lupus while he rejoined his friends, and the wolf dispelled himself with a tired nod. Bakugo stayed in place for a moment, teeth gritted in pure rage, but brought himself to a semblance of composure and walked back to his class, already planning all the ways he'd make the other boy pay in the near future. Test 6, Sit-ups, Test 7, Seated Toe Touch. Nothing of interest happened in either of these tests, as no one had a quirk that helped them in it. Mostly the classmates only came to terms to the show of power that Izuku demonstrated, while said boy and his friends chatted with each other, Izuku confirming Tokoyami's theory on what he had done before. Final test, Distance Run. The final test came and went, and once again only a few of the students really excelled at it. As it was a test of endurance, the ones that gained great results were the ones who had either a speed quirk, could reduce the amount of work necessary to keep running, or just had a different way of moving without much effort. As such, only Izuku, who rode Luna through the entire test dash, Ida, Yaoyorozu, Bakugo, Todoroki and Ishido managed to keep running for over half an hour after all of the tests of the day. As soon as the test was over, Aizawa gathered the students together. Going over each and every one of you individually would be a waste of time, so just look for yourself. He grunted and pressed a button on his device, creating a hologram that showed the final scores of each student. Izuku looked with satisfaction over having second place, right between Yaoyoro's Momo, who seemed to have a good answer to any problem with her matter-creating quirk, and Todoroki Shudo, son of Endeavor, who could create ice with a precision matched only by his control over his moondust, though Izuku was curious on why the team didn't use his fire in any of the tests. Maybe he wasn't as proficient with it? But then again, that burn scar he had on his face made him think that it was something else entirely, and he really hoped that wasn't the case. Among the students, Bakugo could only glare at the scoreboard in fury when he saw that he had placed fourth. 3 people had managed to score better than him, while Mineta looked at it in horror when he found himself in last place, falling to his knees. "Oh yeah, I lied about the expulsion thing," Aizawa said absent-mindedly. When he noticed the students look at him incredulously, he grinned widely, sending shivers down their spines. It was a logical ruse created to bring out the best of you. Mineta let out a whimper. Izuku frowned at his teacher, this time for sure. He knew that the man's history he had expelled the entire 1A class of the previous year, forcing them to regain their spots in the hero course through the sports festival weeks after, and even then some of them hadn't made it back. Of course it was a lie, it was obvious from the start. Yaoyorozu commented, making Izuku sigh. Maybe it would be best if he didn't say anything. Ugh, today was brutal. Izuku grumbled, stretching his arms. The school day had ended early and he and his friends were walking back home together, said the guy who didn't put any effort in the most taxing of the tests. Tokoyami scoffed, rolling her eyes. A good thing too. He grimaced. I didn't lean on Lupus for nothing. I used so much energy summoning him that I was really close to passing out. If Bakugo had jumped me a few seconds earlier, I would have passed out when I defended myself. You shouldn't push yourself that hard. Kuda signed with a frown. Aizawa-sensei had it handled. I know, and I don't plan to. Izuku nodded with a sigh. I guess I just wanted to impress one of my favorite heroes. He's the one that gave me the idea to be a bit more stealth-based, after all, and I copied my retraining scarf technique directly from one of the few videos of him that are online. So he really is an underground hero, huh? Tokoyami hummed. Honestly, I'm wondering if I should go into underground heroics as well. It'll be harder to control Dark Shadow at night, but you're more comfortable out of sight. Izuku nodded. I understand. Personally, I'm aiming for a mix of both. My quirk is too powerful for me to not be on the streets as well. He turned to look at her. I'd say the same thing about yours, really. Even during the day you might be one of the strongest in class, from what I could gather from the tests. He turned to Kuda. And you're not a pushover either. I said it before and I'll say it again, your strength is really big for someone without a strength-enhancing quirk. You could take a lot of villains by yourself, not even relying on your animals that much. The boy blushed, shaking his head. Thank you, but I'm not that strong. Don't sell yourself short, that's Tokoyami's thing when I compliment her. He grinned. Oi. That aside, do you want to join our group chat? He offered to the larger boy. You're a cool guy, we'd love to have you. Yeah, that way I could talk with you as well. Tokoyami nodded in agreement, Morrigan appearing to give him a thumbs up. She frowned. Maybe I really will take you too in those JSL lessons. Kuda blinked in surprise, then smiled widely. Sure, I'd love that. Great. Izuku grinned as well, handing Kuda his phone so that he could put in his number. The boy did so, and Izuku quickly added him to the chat. And just like that, their small group had grown by 1.